And that's one really kind of low-hanging fruit for cities to consider.
So, are we running out of water? Current projections suggest that by 2050, 5 times as much land is likely to be under extreme drought compared to today. Our demand for water is projected to grow by over half in that time, so water scarcity is likely to become an increasing problem. A changing climate, mismanagement and a lack of will have all contributed to the problem. But as our expert witnesses have outlined, it's not that we're running out of water, rather that our relationship with it is broken. There are answers, but they require some big changes and a large amount of rethinking around the way we use water if we're going to ensure there is enough for everyone, everywhere in the future. As one of America's founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, said way back in the 1700s, "When the well is dry, we know the worth of water." This episode of The Inquiry was presented by me, Tanya Beckett, produced by Soila Aparicio, and researched by Matt Murphy.
That was the BBC's The Inquiry. I'm Jeff Goods here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. With me are Pat Kanuga, our show director, and our studio technician, Abby Adeyemi. Travis Peterson is producer of our CBC Manitoba YouTube page, and Heather Wells is in the newsroom with the CBC headlines.
Good morning. Well, one of the private owners of Portage Place Mall says he is happy to see True North Real Estate redevelop what he calls a difficult property. Avtar Baines at Premise Properties is a minority owner of Portage Place and also a partner in the mall with Vancouver's Peterson Group. Baines says True North can do what he and his partners couldn't because they're based in Winnipeg and are working with other levels of government. Winnipeg police are asking for your help finding a missing 81-year-old man. Earl Moberg was last seen in the River East area last evening around 6. Moberg is described as being 5'7", medium build, short white hair with a white beard. Police say they're worried about his well-being. If you have seen him or if you know anything about where he might be, call police. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells. Well, here's what's coming up on the show. First, True North and Southern Chiefs Organization have made it official. They're now working together to transform Portage Place Mall and the former Bay Building. As well, we'll discuss Ukraine's ability to continue fighting on against Russia and the role of financial aid from the United States. Also, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency issued another recall of cut cantaloupe products late last week because of salmonella concerns. House Dr. Raj Bardwaj will bring us that story. And imagine you're in a forest and on a mission to cut down that perfect Christmas tree when you suddenly realize you're lost out in the woods. We'll have more on that story at 7:10. Quick look now at the weather. Mainly sunny today, high -1. Tonight, clear, going down to a low of -3, so not as cold as we've been experiencing recently. Tomorrow, sunny and mild with a high of +3, breezy as well. For Friday, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of +1. Looking ahead to the weekend, Saturday, mix of sun and clouds, a high of -1, and on Sunday, mainly sunny with a high of -4. You're listening to Information Radio.
On Q with Tom Power.
Michael Connolly is a huge figure in the world of crime fiction. He'll be here to talk about his new book, how he got his start as a journalist, why he thinks crime fiction is looked down upon, but why it doesn't really bother him.
The pursuit of a hidden truth is a pitch over the plate to anybody.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Stephanie Skandaris.
We have come to the conclusion that the course correction that is needed has not been secured.
Anne Rasmussen says the COP28 climate deal isn't enough. She represents an alliance of small island nation states. She says a deal just agreed to has promise, but won't limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Despite those concerns, history is being made as the climate summit wraps up. For the first time, delegates agree the era of fossil fuels could be coming to an end. Kyle Bax has more from Dubai.
Hearing no objection, it is so decided.
With the drop of the gavel, 2 weeks of climate talks are over with the New Deal. Countries around the world agreeing on new efforts to tackle climate change.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber.
Together, we have confronted realities and we have set the world in the right direction.
For the first time, a UN climate agreement specifically addresses fossil fuels, saying a transition away is needed to reach net zero by 2050.
I am in awe of the spirit of cooperation that has brought everybody together.
U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry.
To have as strong a document as has been put together, I find, is cause for optimism, cause for gratitude.
Some countries and environmental leaders had wanted more, but it's progress nonetheless, says Catherine Abreu, founder of environmental group Destination Zero.
We have a very clear signal on the end of the fossil fuel era.
The agreement also calls for a tripling of renewable energy and a doubling of energy efficiency around the globe by 2030.
We leave Dubai with our heads held high.
The deal is now done, ending the largest ever global climate summit, but the work on implementing the promises made here is just beginning. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Dubai.
The Israeli army says it has cleared nearly 200 aid trucks to bring supplies into Gaza this morning. It's part of a new process to ease the bottleneck at the Rafah border crossing. But aid groups say the fighting has been too intense in recent days to deliver aid to the places that need it.
Hamas is holding our people hostage in brutal conditions while hiding among and under the people of Gaza. Among and under the people of Gaza. This makes our hostage rescue operation in Gaza complex.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari says the hostage rescue operation will continue for as long as needed. There are unconfirmed reports this morning the IDF is trying to destroy Hamas tunnels by flooding them with seawater. Back home, there is strong reaction to Ottawa's decision to join the international call for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Canada was one of dozens of countries to vote in favor of a ceasefire at the United Nations General Assembly. That's upsetting many members of Canada's Jewish community. But as Olivia Stefanovich reports, there are others who want the government to go even further.
Outside the downtown Ottawa Convention Centre, hosting the Liberal Caucus holiday party, hundreds of upset demonstrators made their stance clear.
We're aware that there was a call for a ceasefire today, but empty words, we're not going to stand for that.
Organizer Hala Alsher says the federal government needs to do more than demand an end to the fighting in the Israel-Hamas war.
This is just the beginning of a very long road to recovery.
Justin Trudeau! Inside the holiday party venue, the Prime Minister didn't mention the word ceasefire.
What's happening in the Middle East is reverberating around the world.
Instead, Justin Trudeau discussed the tensions the conflict is creating within Canada and his own political party.
And we're having hard but necessary conversations together.
Those tensions on full display following Canada's United Nations vote.
153 in favour.
Supporting a call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
I hope it won't affect Canada-Israel relations.
Former Liberal Attorney General Irwin Cotler says Canada made the wrong choice.
I was both surprised and disappointed.
At least two Liberal MPs, Anthony Housefather and Marco Mendicino, also voiced their disagreement on social media. Trudeau may hear more about these concerns when he meets with his Liberal caucus later this morning. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
And U.S. President Joe Biden will meet with the families of American hostages held by Hamas. That's expected to happen later today at the White House. The CBC's Richard Madden joins us with more from Washington. So, Richard, what can we expect?
Well, first off, at this point, it's unclear how many of those families will be in attendance, but it is significant as it'll be their first in-person meeting with the president and his top officials to make a personal plea for the administration to be more assertive and creative to free the American hostages. Now, many did speak with Biden virtually over Zoom about a week after the attack, and since then, the White House and Biden's hostage envoy have been in touch. But many families are reportedly expressing frustration, pointing to a separate deal between Russia and Israel that freed several Israeli-Russian hostages and questioning if U.S. negotiators could be more aggressive. Now, President Biden has said repeatedly he won't rest until all American hostages are released. So the first in-person meeting between the families and the president.
Okay, and this meeting coming amid some tension in the U.S.-Israel relationship, right? What's happening there?
Yeah, Israel's military campaign appears to be sparking tensions with the White House, and those divides are spilling into public view. Over the past few days, President Biden has criticized the approach of Israel's hardline government, casting doubts if it wants a two-state solution, and even calling out Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he needs to change his approach. Take a listen to the president at a recent fundraiser.
But you have to be careful. They have to be careful. The whole world's public opinion can shift overnight. We can't let that happen. We're working relentlessly for the safe return of the hostages. I personally spent...
Yeah, so this rift between the two staunch allies had mostly been contained behind the scenes, but as the civilian death toll rises in Gaza, Biden has become more vocal. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu recently admitted the two disagree on what should happen to Gaza after the war and hopes to reach an agreement on that eventually.
All right, Richard, thanks so much for this.
Thank you.
That's the CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Well, progress is being made on the recommendations from the public inquiry into the 2020 mass shooting in Nova Scotia. That's according to the chair of the committee appointed to oversee the implementation. But as Kayla Hounsell tells us, she was short on details.
I don't have any complaints. I don't see anybody dragging their feet.
Retired judge and committee chair Linda Oland is refusing to put a number on how many of the Mass Casualty Commission's 130 recommendations have been implemented. She says it's not about checking boxes.
We don't want to do that because we'll lose context. We might only focus on the short ones and never require the longer ones to get started.
It's been 8.5 months since the report was released. The commission found the RCMP lacked preparation, communication, leadership, and training. When in April 2020, a man masquerading as a Mountie killed 22 people. Christine Blair is the mayor of Colchester County, where the rampage began.
The veneer of normalcy is thin, but I see the community as doing its absolute best to heal.
The recommendations include major changes to how the RCMP operates and a review of Nova Scotia's policing structure. The province says the review will happen. The committee's discussions are confidential.
There's a lot of work to do yet.
One significant recommendation is to get rid of the RCMP training depot in Regina, replacing it with a university degree and training facilities across the country. On that, Olin would only say she has not heard that any recommendations have been rejected. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Tributes are pouring in for Emmy Award-winning actor Andre Braugher. His publicist confirms he died Monday after a brief illness. Braugher was a Juilliard-trained actor. His big break came in 1989 when he starred in the film Glory, which was nominated for 5 Oscars. But later in life, he took his sense of gravitas and turned it into comedy, starring as Captain Ray Holt in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
All right, we gotta get there quick.
Maybe we should take the chopper.
Here's that chopper.
Deathblade, Sidewinder, it's go time.
Roger that, wet blanket.
No, from now on, call me Velvet Thunder.
One of his co-stars from that show, Terry Crews, called him an irreplaceable talent. Andre Braugher was 61 years old. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, as well as on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. Health officials say 5 people have died in Canada after eating tainted cantaloupe. It's linked to a Salmonella outbreak. Our house doctor, Raj Bardwaj, will join us to discuss the latest on the outbreak. Ukraine's bid to secure more funding from the United States to fight on against Russia. Andre Braugher will catch us up on that situation. But first, True North and the Southern Chiefs organization have made it official. They're now working together to transform Portage Place Mall and the former Bay Building. All that and more coming up on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 6 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a more than 6-year boil water advisory in Titasqueat Cree Nation will soon come to an end. The construction of a new $40 million water pipeline is set to begin in the spring. That pipeline comes after a national $8 billion drinking water class action settlement affecting First Nations. Titasqueat's chief, Tara Lee Beardy, says she never thought she'd see her community get a safe water source. And Manitoba's housing minister says she feels for the families of 2 people who died this week in a tent in an encampment. Bernadette Smith says no one should lose their life because of cold weather. She's looking at using hotels to house people who are homeless, something she says would be a last resort. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And joining me right now in studio is Pat Kanuga with a look at the traffic.
Good morning. Let's start with something else first before I get to traffic.
Yeah.
First off, how are you doing with the early mornings?
Pretty well. I'm adapting. A lot of coffee is helping.
Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, I like how this week you're saying you could be listening to us worldwide.
Yes.
Which it's like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Certainly, we have done in the past, where are you listening to us from? And the reactions we get are astounding. Why don't we do another little, where are you listening or watching us from?
Mm-hmm.
We have heard from Alaska before. We have heard from Hawaii. We have heard from all over the globe, actually. Many people are expats. Where are you listening to us this morning? You can email us. It's very simple. radio893@cbc.ca, radio893@cbc.ca. Or, of course, if you're watching us, and as we're continuing the soft launch of the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, where we are live right now on YouTube. Good morning, as we wave to the camera. You can do a live chat in there as well and let us know where you're watching from. If you're watching from Winnipeg, why, thank you. But, more exotic locations would be welcome as well, like Selkirk or Dauphin. Anyway, so let's do that. Where are you listening to us from or watching us from? radio893@cbc.ca.
We want to hear from Thompson. We want to hear from Dauphin.
Or Hawaii.
From Kenora.
Or Portugal. And I'll mention the traffic line right now. It is 6:13. It's pretty quiet so far. Streets are a little greasy coming in this morning, I noticed, but 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. Let me know if there's anything you see out there that we should pass on. Could still be a little slippery on the sidewalks as well if you're out and about or cycling. For a look at the Winnipeg forecast now, here is Abby Adiemi.
Pat, before I deliver the forecast, you didn't ask me how I'm doing with the early mornings.
Yeah, but you've been doing early mornings for 3 years now. You're past that.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, Pat, when are you going to ask me that? I'm like, okay, I'll take it.
You're always the most joyful person in this building. So, Abby, how are you doing with the early mornings after 3 years?
Meh.
It never gets easier, does it?
Never.
I'm going to go for another sip of coffee.
Okay. Anyway, good morning. Great to be with you here. Current conditions in the city. It's a crisp minus 12 degrees in our city. As you step out today, get ready for a day of changing skies. We're going to be seeing clearer skies this morning. So I'd ask you, grab your morning coffee or tea. Yeah, and embrace the crisp air. Today, we're going to be heading to a high of minus 1 degrees. And of course, you need to brace yourself because according to John Sutter's forecast, the wind is going to be coming south at 10 km this morning. And then later in the afternoon, it's going to be changing south also to 20 km. And with that, it's going to be feeling chilly as minus 20 degrees this morning. So I'd advise you to, bundle up as you head out. Before you head out the door, just a quick reminder for you all. with the chilly temperatures, it's crucial you bundle up and stay warm. Dress in layers, cover your exposed skin, and don't forget your gloves and scarves.
It's 6:15 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, there's a new power couple in town. True North and the Southern Chiefs organization are teaming up on the redevelopment of Portage Place and the former Bay Building. There are still details to work out. For one, True North still has to pull the trigger on the purchase of the mall from its current owners, including Vancouver-based owners Premise Properties. Avtar Bains is the president of Premise, one of the mall's owners. He says he's happy to see Portage Place move on. CBC's Bartley Kivas spoke with Bains at the partnership announcement yesterday to learn more.
Given the long-term ownership of this building and the many efforts to try to get it to be at full capacity, what's it like for you to see it being transferred now, or at least close to being transferred to a new use, to a new owner?
To be quite frank, it's been a difficult period of time since we've owned this asset. And it wasn't for lack of effort, both from a human resource perspective, from a capital perspective, from engaging our employees perspective, from a leasing perspective. We put great energy into making Portage Place successful in its current footprint, okay, given what we were dealt with. What we didn't realize, and it's our bad, what we didn't realize when we purchased the asset is that the structure of the deal made it very difficult for anyone to make this work. You had a land lease, you had a sub-land lease, you have bridge agreements, you got all sorts of things. And in real estate, having clean title, allows you and gives you flexibility to do things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do given the title we have. So we misunderstood what we were buying from a legal lens when we got into the deal. But you're right, we put energy and capital, and we really wanted to make it work as a shopping center, and regrettably that didn't happen. So finally, there's sponsorship from a number of levels of government and private enterprise that have the skill set, the desire, the vision, the capital, the financing to do what we can't do. Like, it's impossible for us to do that, especially being not from the province of Manitoba. So we're thrilled. We had our eyes open when we bought this asset. We thought downtown Winnipeg was on its way up. Talk about a bad call, okay? So now we've got people on the ground in Winnipeg that can change the trajectory, as many speakers said before, change the trajectory and it's not just economic, and it's not just social, and it's not just cultural, and it's everything. Like downtown Vancouver, where I'm from, is in many respects the melting pot of the community. This is not the case. There's people that live in the suburbs in Winnipeg, in our view, that don't want to come downtown, and you got to change that.
That was Avtar Bains of Premise Properties speaking with CBC's Bartley Kivas.
Oh, holy night, the star is brightly shiny. That's all.
That's all you got, Mom?
Yeah.
Hi, it's me, Jim Agapito, and that, of course, is my Yuletide-loving mom, Yolanda. She is my unofficial guide, and heck, the star of my CBC podcast, Recovering Filipino. She taught me all sorts of things about being Filipino, but we never got to tackle one of the biggies, Christmas. Join me for a special Recovering Filipino, the longest Christmas season in the world. You can hear it here on CBC Radio 1 at noon on Boxing Day, or you can find it on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Christmas is a time for magic.
The talking snowman. Well, you don't surprise me anymore.
For tradition.
One just has to have a present from Santa. You do it, Arthur.
And a time for love.
Be kind. And if you really want to see what people are, all you have to do is look.
Enjoy holiday favorites all Christmas Day on CBC and CBC Gem.
20 minutes after 6 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was welcomed yesterday at the White House. He was in Washington trying to raise money to keep Ukraine fighting on against Russia. So far, Zelensky has not secured the billions of dollars he's asking for from Congress, although U.S. President Joe Biden has authorized $200 million in separate military assistance. Andre Braugher joins us now with more. He's a fellow with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, and he's in Ottawa. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Emily.
So just how badly does Ukraine need U.S. support and financial aid right now?
It's fundamental. You can describe American funding as a keystone. There's a bunch of other funding going in, very important funding from the European Union, Canada, some 50 countries. But American money is substantial, and as I say, it forms the keystone. Without American funding, one can argue, one can foresee perhaps, that the Ukrainians would be unable to launch offensive operations in 2024. They could probably sustain a strategic defense for some measure of time, but the other issue also is not just the combat capability, it's the governance side of the equation in Ukraine, because with the war going on and the Ukrainian economy having severe challenges, funding Ukrainians, in order to pay the salaries of the government, of the doctors, nurses in the hospitals, and so on, they're dependent on foreign financial assistance for that. So again, with the American equation missing, that's a tough go for the Ukrainians.
So what is the case Zelensky has been making in Washington?
So Zelensky's case is a very broad-based case. He is arguing that this is a war, Russia versus Ukraine, as democracy versus autocracy, and that Ukraine, as a democratic country, is fighting not only to preserve its own sovereignty and democracy, but in so doing is fighting for the benefit of democracies in the West and the United States in particular in this case. So his appeal to the American Congress is, give us the money to help ourselves fight for democracy, and in so doing, we will be fighting for you.
We've heard that argument before made to the United States. So what did Zelensky achieve in Washington?
He didn't come back with any money in his pocket in terms of new funding. He's got the executively approved thing that Biden had, but that's already old money. But he put it on the front page. He stirred the pot, and basically now the American Congress, the American political apparatus, is going into gear. Will continue to go into gear to look at negotiating whether or not they'll have the compromise. It probably not by the end of this session, which ends in a few days, but after Christmas. The question is, will the Republicans and the Democrats and the Biden administration come to terms on the issue of the Mexican border, which was one of those key issues the Republicans are holding up on policy changes and dealing with the migrants and so on. It's not a closed door, and the American system is designed for this kind of negotiation. So I think people need to be patient, see what happens in the next few weeks over the holidays. Lots of backroom discussion going on, and we'll see when Congress reconvenes in the new year what they bring with them.
And in terms of Ukraine's counteroffensive against Russia, what have been the key successes and failures?
Well, from a strategic point of view, the Ukrainians failed in their offensive, which launched in June. Their objective was to actually drive 90 kilometers through the Russian lines, break through to the Sea of Azov, cutting the Russian land bridge from Russia proper to Crimea. That the Ukrainians managed to about 14 kilometers. The Russian defense was very strong. As a consequence, the Ukrainians made a few tactical gains. They're on the other side, the Russian side of the Dnieper River, further south on the front line, but further north on the front line, the Russians are actually making tactical offensive gains in a place called Advika, a small town there. So there is back and forth, tactically speaking, lots of people being killed, lots of casualties, but no strategic movement.
So how would you characterize the level of European support for Ukraine at the moment as they are struggling?
There is a majority of support in the European Union, but the European Union works on a consensus basis. And there are some key countries like Hungary, Slovakia, possibly the Netherlands with their new government, who are questioning continued support for Ukraine in 2024 and for accession talks, which some European Union people want to start in March. Now, tomorrow there is a summit of the European Union. These issues are being discussed right now as a lead up to that, and we'll see how the summit goes, and we'll see where things fall out. But the Hungarians, for example, are concerned about their minority rights of Hungarians in Ukraine. That's being negotiated, but they have the broader issue, which is, where's this war going? How long can it last? Should Europe keep funding a war that basically sees no end in sight? That kind of thing. And so, we'll see that tomorrow's EU summit will be very interesting.
And so how has the war affected daily life in Ukraine? How is their morale holding up?
I would call it a stoic determination, and that's a contrast to euphoria in 2022. 2023 was a tough year. They strategically didn't go anywhere. They lost lots of people, and the prospects for 2024 are not bright. So with all this put together, the Ukrainian people are still determined to fight for and continue to fight for a sovereign, independent Ukraine. The question that becomes, when the war wears on in 2024, will this determination succumb to exhaustion? And because people are also a key thing. And, foreign aid only does the money, does the equipment, and so on, but it doesn't do people. And the Ukrainians are running short of people and to man the guns in the army. And that's going to be a fundamental question.
Yeah. In another story, Russian President Vladimir Putin is running for president for a fifth time. How much support does he have in Russia right now?
So Levada polling, which is reasonably objective, suggests that he's polling somewhere in the 50-plus range. He needs to get, historically, his figures in these elections are a 70-plus range. So he's feeling the difficulties of the war, and there are official candidates who actually run. He's an autocrat, but he runs. There are people with official opposition voices, if you will, and there are those who are running who are saying we need peace with Ukraine, not surrender, not territorial concession, but some kind of a ceasefire negotiation. On the other hand, he's got Russian nationalists who say, no, we need to defeat Ukraine completely, charge to Kiev, and so on and so forth. And then there are those who are questioning, basically the economy, because he is going to be taking money in 2024. His budget is going to be going to 9% of GDP for defense expenditures, the highest since the Soviet Union days. In order to do that, he needs to take money from education, health, like the social stuff. On the other hand, the Russian economy grew in 2023 as opposed to contraction in 24. So he has a little more money to play with. So, it's a real dynamic situation, and we can't see where it's going to go, but, he will win. But the question is, by how much? And there's a lot of dynamics in play there.
Thank you so much for breaking this all down for us. It's really complicated, and we appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Emily.
Thanks. Andrew Razilis is a fellow with the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, and he joined us from Ottawa. And joining us from the other side of the glass now in studio is Pat Kanuga with a look at traffic.
We're going to hear Heather Wells' news right away, but she just came in a couple of minutes ago. There are police and fire on northbound Main as it turns on at Disraeli, so that might be a bit of a traffic snafu there. So we'll try and get more information on that. If you're in the area and it's safe to do so, please give me a call. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. Once again, northbound Main at Disraeli. Some emergency vehicles in that area.
Thank you, Pat. Taking a quick look at the forecast before we head to news. Mainly sunny today, high -1. Getting a little breezy in the afternoon. Tonight, clear with a low of -3. Tomorrow, sunny and mild, going up to a high of +3 and breezy throughout the day. And for Friday, clearing early, mix of sun and cloud with a high of +1. Well, still to come in this hour of the show, The Canadian Food Inspection Agency issued another recall of cut cantaloupe products late last week, and that's because of salmonella concerns. We'll speak with House Dr. Raj Bhardwaj, who will bring us the latest on that. The CBC Local News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. It's a chilly start to Wednesday in Winnipeg. Minus 12 right now under a clear sky, but we are warming up. Today's high is minus 1 with a south breeze. Tara Lee Beardy never thought she would see her community get a safe source of drinking water. But a national $8 billion drinking water class action settlement affecting First Nations is set to change all that. The chief of Tataskwiak Cree Nation tells CBC News the construction of a water pipeline will begin next spring. Beardy says the community's water has been making people sick for years.
Very happy, very pleased, because hopefully now, our health of our people will improve, because we have a lot of people with chronic illness. And hopefully, that clean drinking water will make a big difference in the health and wellness of all our people.
Tataskwiak has been under a boil water advisory since 2017. Manitoba's Housing Minister Bernadette Smith has been shaken by the deaths of 2 adults found in a tent in an encampment this week.
Something that you don't want to see. You want to make sure that there's resources so people aren't having to lose their life to the elements.
Smith wants outreach teams to go to every encampment and bus shelter to get homeless people a place to stay and other supports. She's even looking at using hotels as a last resort. Smith says shelters are to capacity, and she doesn't want to open more because she calls them a Band-Aid fix. One of the private owners of Portage Place Mall says he is thrilled the property is about to be redeveloped. Avtar Baines at Premise Properties is a minority owner of Portage Place and a partner in the mall with Vancouver's Peterson Group. Baines says he and his partners did their best to make the mall work as a retail shopping centre, and when they couldn't, they tried to sell it to Toronto's Starlight Property. He says when that deal fell through, True North entered the picture.
We actually had called True North before we did the deal with Starlight, and we couldn't come to terms. But it's a lot easier for True North to do a deal when the counterparty is on their knees asking them to do something.
Baines says True North can do what he and his partners couldn't because they're based in Winnipeg and are working with other levels of government. The province's home care system may be able to learn from a program that allows clients and their families to hire their own workers. University of Manitoba Associate Professor Christine Kelly says self- and family-managed care is increasing in popularity. It's grown from 500 clients in 2015 to 1,500 this year.
They can kind of do a more flexible array of tasks that really serve the client in a very family-centered, person-centered way, helping with what needs to be done rather than 20 minutes for a bath and 15 minutes for this. And so there is a lesson there that we can learn without turning the whole system into a market-based home care.
Kelly says it is more work, but families find it offers more flexibility amid staffing challenges in the public system. Winnipeg police are asking for your help finding a missing 81-year-old man. Earl Moberg was last seen in the River East area around 6 last evening. He's described as being 5'7", medium build with short white hair and a white beard, and was last wearing a dark blue or green parka. Police say they are concerned about Moberg's well-being. If you've seen him or know anything about where he might be, call police. Well, if you don't have your Christmas tree yet, you can always go and chop one down yourself. CBC reporter Bryce Hoy spoke with people doing just that legally on a plot of Crown land east of Winnipeg.
Actually got lost in the bush for like 2 or 3 hours, except I found the tree.
Dave Reed drags a balsam fir out of a snow-encrusted forest east of Winnipeg and heaves it onto the back of his pickup truck.
Okay, that's it.
Reed and his wife Yvette Brolt have been cutting down their own Christmas tree for 35 years. Like them, more Manitobans are buying permits to legally harvest on designated patches of Crown land. Between 2010 and 2019, the province sold about 500 permits per year. That average jumped tenfold to 5,000 per year since 2020 when e-licensing was introduced. Some do it to save some cash around the holidays. Permits run for about $10. But Dave and his wife Yvette do it because it's tradition.
He loves going in the bush. You're picking your own tree, and it's just the feeling of being out in the bush on your own.
Manitobans can buy permits online until Christmas Day.
Merry Christmas.
Bryce Hoy, CBC News, St. Rita, Manitoba.
Well, the Winnipeg Jets felt the shark bite last night.
Brendan Dillon rips it through. They score!
Brendan Dillon in the first period on TSN. Winnipeg's only goal of the night as the Jets fall to the Sharks 2-1. Kyle Connor, injured in a knee-on-knee hit in the last game, flew back to Winnipeg yesterday for further assessment by team doctors. Dillon says the Jets missed their key scorer.
He scores a lot of goals for us, but we got to understand that he's not coming back anytime soon. That's the reality of it. We wish him the quickest and best recovery, but overall, there's going to be guys in elevated roles. There's more ice time, more opportunity.
The loss ends Winnipeg's winning streak at 4. The Jets fall now into third spot in the Central Division behind Colorado and Dallas. Winnipeg ends its road trip tonight in Los Angeles. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather. And back to that story about the Christmas trees. Have you ever done that, like cut down your own tree?
You know what? We used to live in the country, so we always would cut down our own tree. As a child, as an adult, I don't think so, no.
It's kind of a lot of work.
It is. It really is. And you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, no kidding. It could be dangerous. Yeah, but fun for the children. I grew up in the city, so I've never done that, but maybe one day I will.
Yeah, and you've been out in Manitoba's wilderness spaces. You probably are getting used to it now. Who knows? Get yourself an axe and head out there.
I think that's the big thing. I have to learn how to use the axe or the saw.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells joining us from the news desk. And in now with a look at the traffic and weather is Pat Kanuga.
But first, where are you listening from?
Ah, yes. Where are you listening from?
Smokers.
Have we gotten some responses?
So let's start with closer to home. Hello, Peter from Strathclair. We appreciate you listening and watching on our YouTube channel.
Excellent.
Terry from Hallock, Minnesota, down Highway 75. Good morning, Terry. And I'm going to get into detail on these more next half hour. Scotland, Brazil, and Mississauga.
How cool.
And a few more from around the globe. So we'll get into those next hour, but we're going to ask you, where are you listening from on the CBC Listen app or online at cbc.ca/Manitoba?
Worldwide.
Worldwide, or email us 788-3, not email, that's the listener line, radio893 at cbc.ca. It's always fun to hear where you're listening from around the globe. Worldwide, as Emily's been saying this week. Let's get into the forecast here. It is minus 12, not the minus 18 that we were told yesterday. Not told, but Environment Canada said maybe a minus 18 overnight. John Slaughter said around minus 11. I plugged in the car because I wasn't sure, but it's not too bad out there this morning. Minus 12 right now, not too much wind. Today we'll get to a minus 1 in the sunshine and a little bit of wind, south 10 this morning, south 20 this afternoon. Tonight we will dip down to only a minus 3 and we'll have clear skies, and tomorrow sunny and a plus 3. A little bit of wind, a little bit more wind tomorrow, south 25 throughout the day, and then Friday we're at a 1. Into your weekend, a minus 1 and a minus 4. And to start off next week, minus 3s, a pair of them for Monday and Tuesday. So the mild temps continue here in this El Nino winter. Sunrise, 8:17, and sunset is 4:27, I should mention. So we are almost getting to next week, or a couple of weeks from now, and we'll have the days starting to get a little bit longer. Brandon, you're minus 15, partly cloudy on the way to a 0 today. Wind gust to 50 this morning from the southwest. Tonight dipping down to only a minus 2, and tomorrow a high of plus 1 in the sunshine, Brandon. And Thompson, you're minus 16, a high of minus 6 today with cloud cover. Temperature rises to minus 2 by the morning, and tomorrow, Thompson, sunny and plus 1. Once again, in the city, we are minus 12 degrees. Just something I mentioned in traffic, possibly there could still be some emergency crews northbound Main at Disraeli, which might be slowing things down. So if you're in that area and you're able to update us on that, please do at the traffic line. It is 788-3093.
Thank you, Pat. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. It's just about 20 minutes before 7 o'clock. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Time now for some business news. Crystalie Ramlakan is here with the CBC Business Report. Good morning, Crystalie.
Hi, good morning, Emily.
So a new survey is giving us more of an idea about how Canadians are feeling about their finances during these uncertain economic times. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the report from BMO digs into how concerns about the economy are affecting financial anxieties and approaches to financial planning in the new year. So it says nearly a third of Canadians plan to cut spending next year over cost of living concerns, and 42% plan on changing their financial New Year's resolutions. So that includes creating financial goals or a budget for 2024. Now, when it comes to the holidays, more than half plan on using credit cards to buy gifts. And on average, Canadians believe it will take 3 months to pay back their holiday bills. And a quarter are not confident they will be able to pay off their post-holiday bills even on time. So the survey says while most Canadians, they do have financial goals, but the majority do not have a firm financial plan or household budget. So that's something that the bank says people can work on. And the bank also says, while many people are looking forward to celebrating with family and loved ones these upcoming holidays, it is important to not get financially carried away during the holidays. So if you don't have the money, don't feel the pressure to spend it. And Emily, this survey of more than 2,500 adult Canadians was conducted about 2 months ago. So, even in that time, I'm sure people are feeling the squeeze even more.
Yeah, and I guess the only way to know what you can afford is by doing that budget. So I better get on that myself, Crystalie. So there's a new report about the country's tourism industry. What does that say?
Yes, so this new report from Destination Canada says the country's tourism industry won't fully recover until next year, after, of course, the pandemic. So the Crown Corporation says the number of overnight leisure and business visits in the country will fall just short of 2019 levels by the end of this year. And the projections, though, show figures will beat pre-pandemic numbers by a very small margin next year. So a little optimism there looking forward. Now, Destination Canada, it promotes tourism across the country. And it says spending in the sector will exceed 2019 levels this year, though. But that is largely driven by inflation. So, of course, things cost more. So there's going to, show more spending. Now, the organization says keys to growth in the industry include attracting wealthier tourists, building out the workforce, and attracting more visitors outside of peak season. So for more on this, here's Megan Ferregno, who is with Destination Canada.
When we think about recovery, it has been uneven. After 2 years of restrictions, there were also 2 years of lost revenue for our businesses, and they've been unable to operate at full capacity. So we're seeing that not all of our operators are back to the full recovery, and they're seeing significant challenges around the debt loads, inflation, and workforce to get their businesses up and running.
Yeah, so, leisure travel was the main driver over the past 2 years, but business travel is starting to pick up again. Now, the group says while the projected annual tourism growth rate of nearly 6% through 2030 is expected to exceed overall economic growth here in Canada, the pace is actually sluggish compared to global tourism revenues that are forecast to decline by more than 7% each year.
Interesting. And then meanwhile, some people say their favorite snack just doesn't taste the same these days. What's behind that?
Yes, and people are not imagining those things. Manufacturers are quietly modifying their recipes to save money and maintain their profit margins. So the phenomenon has been called skimpflation or even flavorflation. And so companies say it's a way to hide the impacts of inflation and avoid passing on higher costs to consumers. So a survey last year by a company that helps manufacturers procure ingredients found that more than a third of the brands that it works with changed recipes of more than 20 products since 2020. Now, most blamed inflation for those changes, and we did see that disruptions caused by the pandemic, did cause the cost of some ingredients to go up. But, by replacing expensive ingredients with cheaper ones, companies are also making food less tasty, sometimes less healthy, and less satisfying. But companies often have to make that decision. Are customers going to accept higher prices or a different flavor? So for the most part, companies, they're not required to announce when they make these kinds of changes, but consumers certainly are noticing. So last year, the company that makes Smart Balance margarine decided to reduce the vegetable oil in it, replacing it with water. And the company didn't announce it, but consumers were not pleased. And the item got almost 1,000 one-star reviews on the company's website. Now, the company has promised to bring back the old formula, but of course, Emily, not all companies are going to do that.
I've noticed it myself. There's actually a certain fast food restaurant I won't mention where I was a big fan of their veggie burger. And the last time I went, it was clearly not the same veggie burger. It was smaller. It didn't taste as good. And at first I thought I got the wrong order. So I think people will notice more than they realize. So what's happening in the markets so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are higher as investors await the U.S. Federal Reserve's last monetary policy decision of the year. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, China is leading declines. Japan is up. Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is up 22 cents to $68.83 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $3.10 to $1,996.30 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is up almost 1/10 cent to 73.66 cents U.S.
Thank you, Crystal Lee.
All right, thanks, Emily.
That was Crystal Lee Ramlakan with the business news. It is 6:45 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. The holiday entertaining season is well underway, and if you've been thinking about hosting family and friends but worry about breaking the bank, Julie Rand Rosendahl has some tips to entertain on the cheap. She's a cookbook author and a CBC radio food columnist. She talked about budget-friendly entertaining food with CBC's Lauren McGuinness.
This won't be the year of the cheese and charcuterie board. There are a lot of expensive ingredients, nuts, chocolate, cheese. I say there's a lot of affordable food that's delicious. Pretzels, popcorn, even that, cereal Chex Mix, party mix is expensive when you buy the 4 different kinds of cereal and the nuts. But just the pretzels, the sticks, or the twists, you can spice them up with a little bit of melted butter, Worcestershire sauce, or balsamic, some spices, whatever spice blend you happen to have. I put some rosemary in there.
What's on these ones? Yeah, I was going to say.
Rosemary, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of brown sugar or maple syrup. If brown sugar is hard to find right now. But and you just toss them, melt the butter, toss them all together, put them in the oven. They're kind of glazed and they're tasty. Fried saltines. So next to the pretzels, saltine crackers, really inexpensive. If you fry them in a little bit of oil until they turn sort of mahogany, they're delicious. They're so delicious. I don't know what makes them so delicious. You could infuse the oil if you want. Oh, you could put some garlic in the oil, just sort of infuse it. You could put some rosemary in there. Just sort of an inexpensive little snack. And I also brought some horchata, which is a family of Latin American drinks made with rice, with soaked nuts, with spices. Usually it's plant milk, sometimes it's dairy milk. So this one I made with rice that you blend in the blender and then you put in a bowl, you cover with water, you let it soak for 8 hours or overnight. You put in some cinnamon sticks, you could put some star anise in there, and then you strain it and then you can add some milk. You can add some other spices if you like, a little bit of sugar, and it tastes like sippable rice pudding. It's not as sort of thick as eggnog.
You know what? When you brought it in, I thought, oh, she's brought me eggnog, which I would have been up for, but it is, it's nicely thinner, and then I love horchata,
Yeah.
What's the spice on top?
So the spice on top is nutmeg, which is like a whole spice, that you grate over top. So nutmeg is very associated with the holidays. But so, you can feed people inexpensively, and it's the big dinner, it's the big feast that can be overwhelming, that can be really pricey. You can have it later at night so that people have already eaten, have some nibbles, have bar snacks, right? And then earlier in the day, there isn't as much pressure to have the whole bar as well, right? And there's a lot of opportunities to have like waffles and filling things like, cinnamon buns and breakfasty things.
Great tips there. It's all about the flavor, and if you're going to take someone out for a meal, do breakfast. Julie Van Rosendahl is a cookbook author and CBC food columnist. She was speaking with CBC's Lauren McGuinness.
Ever hear a really good radio show and fall in love right away? Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Find CBC radio shows like As It Happens and Now or Never and stream them anytime, anywhere for free. Download CBC Listen today.
Just about 10 minutes before 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Still to come in the next hour, are you searching for that perfect tree? Well, it's not supposed to be stressful. CBC reporter Bryce Hoy recently visited a tree lot in St. Rita where people can cut down their own Christmas trees, and he spoke with a couple that ran into some obstacles during that search. We'll have that after World Report. But first, officials are calling on Canadians to check their fridges and freezers for any cantaloupe. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency issued another recall late last week linked to that fruit. It's related to a deadly Salmonella outbreak that's claimed the lives of 5 people and sickened dozens more. The recalled cantaloupe covers the Malachita and Rudy brands. Those were sold between mid-October and mid-November. Our house doctor, Raj Bhardwaj, joins us now to explain more about this infectious disease.
Good morning, Emily.
So how extensive is this outbreak?
It's a pretty big one. The Public Health Agency of Canada says that as of December 7th, there were 129 confirmed cases of Salmonella infections linked to those 2 brands of cantaloupe that you mentioned, Rudy and Malachita. The infections were mostly in kids under age 5 and adults over age 65. There have also been 44 people hospitalized because of their infections. And unfortunately, 5 people have died from their infection. And then this outbreak is also linked to an outbreak in the U.S. with at least 230 people sick and 2 confirmed deaths across 30 states that they know of. So it's pretty big. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency, of course, recalled those 2 brands of whole cantaloupes, but they also said that if you bought fruit platters with cut melons or frozen cut cantaloupe, and if you're not sure of what brand cantaloupe was used in those, then you should return those or discard them. And then there have been secondary recalls for other fruit that might have been processed along with the contaminated cantaloupe, like other cut melons and pineapple and things like that. But here's the thing. You don't need to have eaten cantaloupe to get this. You can catch the bacteria directly from the contaminated food for sure, but also from cross-contamination on surfaces and knives and stuff like that. And then you can also catch other people's food poisoning if they're not washing their hands well enough, or if you're not washing your hands well enough.
Wow, so many ways you can catch it. So what is Salmonella exactly?
So Salmonella is a type of bacteria. It causes food poisoning, but it can also cause more serious blood infections. So the symptoms of food poisoning usually kick in anywhere from 6 hours to 6 days after the bacteria gets into your system. And they can vary from person to person. So think food poisoning symptoms, right? Fever, stomach cramps, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and then if you get dehydrated, then feeling thirsty and not peeing as much, or the kids might have darker yellow pee, things like that. And most people get better on their own within about a week. But this sort of reminds us that, a lot of people think, oh, Salmonella, that's from chicken and stuff, right? Well, raw produce is a major player in the food poisoning game because it can be contaminated anywhere from, the field where it's growing all the way along each step of processing until it hits your fork.
Wow. And so this outbreak has been linked to deaths, unfortunately. Dozens of hospitalizations, even more people sick from it. Is Salmonella usually this dangerous?
So a couple of things. I mean, this outbreak seems to be related to a few particular strains of Salmonella that aren't usually seen. And so maybe they're just more virulent in people. But with any Salmonella infection, there's sort of 2 ends of the spectrum. So the one end of the spectrum, the biggest danger, is if the bacteria invade from your gut into your bloodstream. And that's more common in young kids and in older adults. And those 2 groups make up about 80% of the cases that we've identified so far. Of course, anyone who has an immune system that isn't working as well as it usually does, whether that's due to a medical condition or medication side effects or even pregnancy, those folks are also at risk. The serious infection can also be more common if you take over-the-counter medications that stop your diarrhea. So, because that makes it so that your body can't flush the germs out of your system, and they can overpopulate, and then they can invade from your gut into your bloodstream. On the other end of the spectrum, though, are the people who get infected with Salmonella and they don't actually develop many symptoms at all. They feel pretty much fine. They're still infected, they're still contagious, they're still carrying and shedding the bacteria in their stool, but they're not actually very symptomatic. But that's another reason why universal hand washing is such an important habit to develop for everyone. The other thing to note is that if you take antibiotics for Salmonella food poisoning, it can certainly decrease your symptoms, but it also usually makes it so that you shed the bacteria for longer. So you're actually still contagious even though you're not having symptoms anymore. So in people who aren't that sick, it's often safer to let your immune system fight the infection and just support yourself with, the fluids and things like that, rather than necessarily taking antibiotics. But that's a decision that you make with your doctor once the diagnosis is made.
And how is that diagnosis made?
So it's not a tough diagnosis to make, but we ultimately need to isolate the bacteria. So we do that from a stool sample or a blood test. Remember, most people are going to have symptoms for about a week. And a lot of times, if you go see the doctor in the first couple of days and you're not that sick, we're sometimes going to say, we don't need to do stool samples because you're probably going to get better. And if we did stool samples on everybody who had a day of funny pooping, we would be doing a lot of stool samples and we would probably overwhelm the labs. So that's another reason that this outbreak is kind of notable, because we've already identified hundreds of cases throughout North America, which means that there have undoubtedly been more actual cases than that, because a lot of the time we don't sort of do the tests until people are, quite sick or until their symptoms have gone on longer than about 5 to 7 days.
So if someone thinks, maybe they had some of that Salmonella food poisoning from cantaloupe, what should they do?
Well, if you're sick, then for sure see your doctor and let them know if you've had cantaloupe in the last week, especially if you've bought it a while ago, before the recalled items were pulled from store shelves. In terms of what can you do for yourself, for the food poisoning symptoms, it's all about supporting your body while your body kills the infection. So plenty of rest, small sips of fluid, plain old acetaminophen for the aches and pains. Don't prepare foods for anyone else, of course. And then again, because stopping the diarrhea can increase the risk that the bacteria will go from your gut into your bloodstream, I would avoid medications like loperamide, which is Imodium, because it will stop your diarrhea, and that can increase your risk of getting worse. If you are sicker, fevers, sweats, shaking, shivering, chills, then we want to see you in the emergency department, unfortunately. Adults can take plain old Pepto-Bismol. The biz in Pepto-Bismol is bismuth, and it works to bind and inactivate the germs in your gut so they can't easily penetrate into the bloodstream. But if you're sick and you're not sure what's going on, go get some personalized advice from your doctor. And, of course, even if you're not that sick, then just wash your hands before eating and before preparing foods, especially if you're cooking for a group, like during the holidays.
Always good advice. And before we let you go, Dr. Braugher, you wanted to remind kids to get their questions in?
Absolutely, yeah. If you're a kid and you're listening, or if you have a child and you're listening, then get your kids to send me health and medical questions. If they have any questions about, they're curious about their bodies or anything, send them to the show, and I'll be answering some of them next week. So far, the one that stands out is a 6-year-old who asked, "Where do farts come from?" Which is actually a pretty interesting story. So we'll talk about that next week.
I think everyone's a bit curious about that one. Thanks so much, Dr. Braugher.
My pleasure.
That's our house doctor, Raj Bardwaj. It is now just 2 minutes before 7 o'clock, and Heather Wells is standing by with the CBC News headlines.
Good morning. Manitoba's housing minister says she feels for the families of 2 people who died this week in a tent in an encampment. Bernadette Smith says no one should lose their life because of cold weather. She wants outreach teams going to every encampment and bus shelter to get homeless people a place to stay and other supports. More Manitobans are chopping down their own Christmas trees legally on Crown lands. Between 2010 and 2019, about 500 permits were sold a year. Now it's up to 5,000 a year. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells in our newsroom. Quick look at the forecast. Mainly sunny today, high -1, getting breezy this afternoon, then clear tonight with a low of -3, getting mild tomorrow and sunny with a high of 3. Pat Kanuga's in here now with a look at the traffic.
Northbound Main at Disraeli. You cannot get onto Disraeli because of an emergency incident there. So vehicles are being not barricaded, detoured around that on Rupert or elsewhere. So once again, northbound Main at Disraeli. You cannot get to the Disraeli Freeway.
Thank you, Pat. Well, still to come in the next hour, how much do you spend on holiday shopping? We'll chat with a Winnipegger who's found a secret to saving money during the holiday season, and that's thrifting. All that and more still to come. World Report is next.
Today on The Current.
The Fifth Estate.
I'm Adrienne Clarkson. Tonight we report on a secret CIA research project.
Before she was Governor General, an award-winning author, Adrienne Clarkson was an acclaimed journalist. She's now been inducted into the CBC News Hall of Fame. Adrienne Clarkson on the greatest stories she's told, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Stephanie Skandaris.
I think this is a global turning point. For the first time, the world is committing to transition away from fossil fuels.
That's Ursula von der Leyen reacting to today's climate change deal, the European Union Commission President speaking at the EU Parliament in France. For the first time, nearly 200 countries said they'll begin reducing their consumption of fossil fuels. Kyle Bax has more details on the historic agreement from Dubai.
Hearing no objection, it is so decided.
With the drop of the gavel, 2 weeks of climate talks are over with the New Deal. Countries around the world agreeing on new efforts to tackle climate change.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber.
Together, we have confronted realities and we have set the world in the right direction.
For the first time, a UN climate agreement specifically addresses fossil fuels, saying a transition away is needed to reach net zero by 2050.
I am in awe of the spirit of cooperation that has brought everybody together.
U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry.
To have as strong a document as has been put together, I find, is cause for optimism, cause for gratitude.
Some countries and environmental leaders had wanted more, but it's progress nonetheless, says Catherine Abreu, founder of environmental group Destination Zero.
We have a very clear signal on the end of the fossil fuel era.
The agreement also calls for a tripling of renewable energy and a doubling of energy efficiency around the globe by 2030.
We leave Dubai with our heads held high.
The deal is now done, ending the largest ever global climate summit, but the work on implementing the promises made here is just beginning. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Dubai.
Canada's Environment Minister says this agreement includes breakthrough commitments on renewable energy, energy efficiency, and a global transition away from fossil fuels. Stephen Guilbeault wrote in a statement this morning that the text is not perfect, but in it, he sees a vision the world can rally around. Guilbeault has been in Dubai for the climate talks. That's where he unveiled Canada's new emissions capping plan to reduce carbon emissions in the oil and gas sector. Well, the United Nations resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war may be non-binding, but it is revealing where some countries who are normally allies are divided. Abhi Kugathasan has reaction.
A Palestinian life that's lost is just as important as any other life in the world that's lost.
Canada's ambassador to the UN, Bob Rae, says with more than 18,400 people now killed in Gaza, it was time for Canada to shift its policy and vote for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war.
The situation on the ground is changing. It's getting worse. And so we have to respond to that in a humanitarian way.
Rae says Canada will always support Israel's right to exist. He also says the adopted resolution doesn't hand any type of victory to Hamas, but the resolution is being criticized by Israel's ambassador to Canada, Ido Moed. He says Hamas militants remain the IDF's only target.
We are fighting a terrorist organization
with all the means that we have. If we don't win, we don't exist.
Moed says Tuesday's non-binding UN resolution doesn't change anything. Still, General Assembly votes are very much about taking the global temperature on a matter. 153 countries voted for a ceasefire. 10 voted against, including the United States. But U.S. President Joe Biden has made public remarks that do not align with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden says Netanyahu risks losing international support due to the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. The two leaders also disagree on a post-war plan. Biden says Netanyahu doesn't want a two-state solution, which many nations, including Canada, believe is the best way to achieve a permanent peace for both Israelis and Palestinians. Abby Kualas in CBC News, Berlin.
In Kyiv, broken glass is strewn about this man's apartment. For the second time in a week, Russia has launched a missile attack on the Ukrainian capital. The country's national police service says at least 53 people were injured. The attack blew out windows, caused fires, and destroyed cars. A children's hospital was also damaged. President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Oslo this morning for a summit with 5 Northern European leaders. He spent the last few days in Washington pleading for more financial aid, but many Republican lawmakers are reluctant to agree. Well, between the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine, conflicts in Sudan, Myanmar, and elsewhere around the world, the United Nations estimates 114 million people are displaced globally. Filippo Grandi is the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees.
It is a figure that reflects a crisis, in fact, many crises of humanity. However, it also represents the generosity and hospitality of the people who open their hearts and homes to those fleeing.
Grandi also says many Western politicians are becoming less welcoming to refugees. He was speaking at the Global Refugee Forum in Geneva this morning, an event designed to raise funds for the agency. Grandi says it's currently facing a $400 million shortfall for 2023. A blanket of snow is covering Beijing this morning. Kids throw snowballs in a city park. Their schools are closed today because of the snow. This is the second wave of cold the Chinese capital has experienced this week. Temperatures are expected to hit minus 18 degrees in the coming days. That's much lower than the average of minus 8 for this time of year. The city of Hamilton, Ontario, says it has an answer to a problem that was making a big stink. Officials had 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of sediment contaminated with sewage and had nowhere to put it until now. CBC's Bobby Herstova has the raw details.
So it's 16,000 tons, approximately, that was dredged out of the bottom of the creek.
Carrie Vanderperk is Hamilton's Director of Watershed Management. She's referring to Chidoke, a creek that flows into Lake Ontario and is the site of a massive sewage spill. Some 24 billion litres of sewage and stormwater spilled into the creek from 2014 to 2018 after a valve in the city's combined sewer overflow system was left open. The city pleaded guilty to charges laid by the province in July and paid nearly $3 million in fines and damages.
Really doing a lot of work internally to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. This event really shook us and certainly the community as well.
It took 4 months and $10.4 million for the city to dredge up the sediment. Hamilton was initially dumping the sediment in a local landfill, but the province told the city it had to find another location because of the type of waste. Vanderperk said the city has found a suitable landfill in Sarnia, Ontario, and is moving the sediment there. Ian Borsick is the interim executive director of a local advocacy group, Environment Hamilton. He said the situation was horrible, but there's a silver lining.
This whole scandal has really exposed Hamiltonians to how our relationship with water has evolved over the years, and that we need to do a much better job going forward.
The city must get all the sediment in the landfill by the end of the year. Bobby Herstova, CBC News, Hamilton.
For the first time in 70 years, a different monarch is featured on Canadian coins. The Royal Canadian Mint is holding exchanges for people to get their hands on some of the first loonies, toonies, nickels, and dimes with the portrait of King Charles. Nicole Williams has more.
Nice and shiny. Well, that's a good portrait of him.
Inside the Royal Canadian Mint in downtown Ottawa, people like Shannon McClanahan lined up, eagerly waiting to get their hands on the new coins.
It's nice. And you see he's turned a different way than the Queen.
In exchange for $3.40, people got $3.40. All Canadian coins that now bear the portrait of King Charles III. Alex Reeves is with the Royal Canadian Mint.
The first new coin in 70 years to feature a different monarch, so it's very significant. It's a historic change to our coins, and people want to be a part of that.
An adjustment for people like Bonnie Donovan.
It feels weird, but because, for most of my life, she's the only monarch I've known.
The coins are entering circulation just 7 months after the coronation of King Charles, an unprecedented timeline for the Royal Canadian Mint. Some like 11-year-old Léon Girard and mom Melanie Parenteau driving hours for what will no doubt become a collector's item.
He wanted to be one of the first one in his class to get the new coin.
Officials with the Mint say it may be a little while longer before you get one of these at a cash register. Entering new coins into circulation takes time. The good news is that anything with the Queen's face on it still counts. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, and worldwide on the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Here's what's coming up on this hour of the show. Whether it's the river or a retention pond in your neighborhood, thin ice can be deceiving and unpredictable. We'll have more on how you can stay safe around ice surfaces as the inconsistent weather continues. We'll find out why a group of Winnipeggers are ditching the mall completely this holiday season, and a little hint, it has to do with thrifting. But first, imagine you're in a forest on a mission to cut down that perfect Christmas tree when you suddenly realize you're lost out there in the wilderness. We'll hear more on that story coming up after the headlines. It's 11 minutes after 7 o'clock. Time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the chief of Tataskwiak First Nation says she never thought she would see her community get a safe water source. But a more than 6-year boil water advisory in Tataskwiak is soon going to come to an end. The construction of a new $40 million water pipeline will begin next spring. We'll tell you how that came about coming up. And one of the private owners of Portage Place Mall says he's happy to see True North Real Estate redevelop what he calls a difficult property. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And joining us now in studio is Pat Kanuga with a look at the traffic.
Well, a big one this morning. So northbound Main at Disraeli, there's an ongoing fire there. So northbound Main has been closed at Disraeli, and northbound traffic is being diverted westbound onto Rupert or eastbound onto eastbound Disraeli. Winnipeg Traffic Management Center on X just suggests to avoid the area. So once again, northbound Main at Disraeli. Anything else that's going on out there, please let us know. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. We are going to get to just in a moment. Where are you listening from? I've got some mind-blowing responses, Emily, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first, here's Abby Adiemi with Winnipeg's forecast today.
Good morning once again. Great to be with you here. It's a chilly start to Wednesday in Winnipeg. Today's forecast promises a mix of sun and clouds. And of course, the current conditions, it's a crisp -12 right now under clear skies, but we're warming up, and today's high is currently going to be sitting at -1. That's what we'll be getting for the high for today, Pat. Back to you.
Thanks. So if you're just joining us, last hour, all week, Emily's been saying, worldwide listening to us, which is like, yeah, people are worldwide. And we haven't done this for a while, but we thought, where are you listening from? We just thought we'd give us an email at radio893@cbc.ca, and you can watch us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel now, and had some responses on there in the chat. But are you ready for this, Emily?
I can't wait to hear.
Dagmar Chomova, Liberec, Czech Republic.
Whoa.
Used to live in Winnipeg. That's from Dagmar. Thank you, Dagmar, for listening. Good morning. I'm Raquel, and I'm listening to you from Fortaleza, northeast of Brazil. It's a way to keep in touch with English and to remember the precious time I had when I lived in Winnipeg back in 2006. I love Canada. Have a nice day to you all.
Aw.
Thank you, Raquel. Doug and Kathy Johnson, who are listening to you from Corn Island, Nicaragua.
Wow.
Wow. And this from Doug Pritchard. Although I just arrived back in Winnipeg to spend Christmas with my family, I regularly listen to your broadcast in my office in Aberdeen, Scotland. It can get a bit weird when hearing of looming blizzards or a minus 30 temperatures and then looking out the window and seeing the Scottish rain. I love your show as it keeps me connected to the province. Thank you, Doug. And one more, Nan from near Monterey, California. Thank you, Nan. And Maria gave us a note as well that she was traveling last week in Chicago and tuned into our YouTube channel, was able to hear local news and updates even though she was far from home. So thank you. Two more here. Listening from Florida, Gordon Bacon. Thank you, Gordon. And Valley Marco, listening to us from Cozumel, Mexico.
Oh my gosh.
So that's just a sample of where people are listening to us from on the World Wide Web. So cbc.ca/Manitoba. You can click on right on the left-hand corner and listen to us live, the CBC Listen app, and of course our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and 89.3 FM and 990 AM if you're old school.
Yes. It shows how Winnipeg has an influence around the world. We don't realize how many connections we have to other countries and other places. And thanks everyone for listening.
And all the expats.
It's 7:15 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1 and worldwide, as we just touched on. Keep those messages coming, by the way. Send us emails, comment on our YouTube channel if you can. Christmas is now less than 2 weeks away, and the rush is on to find that perfect tree. CBC reporter Bryce Hoey recently visited some crown land in the community of St. Rita, and he caught up with Yvette Bro. She says she and her husband Dave Reed enjoy chopping down their own tree. It's been their Christmas tradition for 35 years, but during the interview, her husband Dave ended up getting lost in the woods.
Dave! Yvette says you have to go home for dinner. He started this story and he doesn't even know it yet.
Oh yeah.
Is this the first time you've been out here doing this with Dave?
No, approximately 35 years we've been doing this.
35 years. This plot of crown land or other ones too?
No, we started off at the tree line years and years ago, but you're not allowed to do that anymore. So we started coming here about 7 years ago, okay. 6, 7 years ago, something like that.
And does Dave always disappear for some undefined period of time and worry you like this?
No, usually we're together with the family, and they go in together to get the tree, and then he comes out, but he wanted to get something special this year.
What kind of a tree do you normally look for?
Balsam fir, and I think they're further in than out on the tree line or on the lane here.
So Dave has a fairly discerning eye when it comes to exactly what tree meets his threshold of what's good enough.
Yes, he does, and he wants a nice bushy balsam fir because they smell good.
So he's looking for one that's bushy and also about how tall?
Well, probably 6 or 7 feet. Like a tall one, because we have high ceilings in our house, so we could put a nice big tree in there.
What is it about cutting a tree down versus, say, going to the store to get one, or a plastic one even, that appeals to you folks for the last 35 years or so?
It's just because you're out in the bush. He loves going in the bush. You're picking your own tree. You're not going to a lot to get a tree, and I don't know, it's just the feeling of being out in the bush on your own. It feels good.
Doing it for 35 years, it's almost like it's become a ritual or something for you two.
It is a ritual, and that's why he wants to keep doing it, even if the kids weren't able to come with us this year. We used to live in northern Quebec, up in Shefferville. I don't know if you ever heard of the area.
I have not.
And way up north. And he used to get off of the train in the middle of the woods, and he could walk for a couple of days, and then he'd get back to the train track and flag the train down, and he'd be able to get on the train. So he's not worried when he's in the woods. But I am.
You're worried when he's in the woods?
Yes.
What was the last thing he said to you when he disappeared into the forest to get the tree?
He said, just stay here on the trail, and I'll find the tree, and I'll find my axe, and then I'll yell to you that I'm on my way back.
Didn't tell you when, didn't tell you how long to stay on the trail, didn't tell you to have some hot coffee, just because it could be a while?
No, he didn't. He said, just wait till you hear my voice.
Oh my goodness, sounds a little scary. Well, before they knew it, they did hear some rustling out in the leaves, and Dave suddenly appeared with the tree of his dreams.
Oh, there he is.
Whoa.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Your wife is very worried.
Yeah, I actually got lost in the bush for like 2 or 3 hours. I had a pretty good sense of direction, but you got to weave in and out. The underbrush is so thick. I think I weaved in and out a little bit too much.
You weaved out when you should have weaved in.
Yeah, exactly. Like I knew the sun was setting in the southwest, that I had to go kind of east, but I think I was going due north, parallel to the trail. And then I found my tracks and came back. I was calling for Yvette. And then when I found her, I went back in, and lo and behold, I found the tree.
The tree, the exact tree
The
of your
exact
dreams.
tree. Yes, except in all the whatever, I lost my saw.
That's okay. Have you? That's the main thing, right? We don't need the saw. We can always get another saw.
I hope this tree will be worth it. We come here every year. I know the area, but anyway. And look at the tree scraping it through the bush.
It's a nice tree.
Yeah, but look at it. It's all scraped up, but that'll be a story to tell.
It's a tree with character.
Oh boy.
Just like you, it has some character.
Oh gosh.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be worth it.
My wife worries about me because I had bypass surgery a while ago, and I've got, a few arteries that aren't in the best of shape, but I'm still pretty fit, so.
I'd say so. You just lugged an 8-foot tree out of the forest after disappearing for a few hours, so.
Still around.
Any moment in your hunt for this perfect elusive tree where you started to get a little bit worried? Because the sun is setting, as you say.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a race against the clock, Dave.
I think when I left the tree and I couldn't find any tracks or anything, I kind of got a bit concerned. And I started calling Yvette, but I couldn't hear her. I don't know. Anyway, here we are.
You might want to hug it out because it was a little bit tense for a moment there.
Yeah, she was worried about me.
It's okay.
Yeah,
and
I'm forgiven.
Thank heaven you guys came along.
I asked your wife, what constitutes the perfect tree? Like, give me a visual of what Dave's looking for. Said probably 8 feet tall, a balsam fir.
Yeah, balsam
and I'm
fir.
looking at a balsam fir. It's probably between 7 and 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
I think you met the criteria
Yeah.
perfectly well. What you two had decided you were going to go after.
Yes,
so, well done.
branchy, but the balsam fir it smells so nice in the house in the winter, yeah.
I think it'll be extra odorous now that you've opened up the bark with the scraping.
Let's hope so.
That was CBC's Bryce Hoy speaking with Dave Reed and Yvette Braugher in St. Rita. That's just east of Winnipeg. with one beautiful thing. Time right now is 25 minutes after 7 o'clock, and it's minus 12 at the Forks, going up today to a high of minus 1, breezy in the afternoon and mainly sunny. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Well, it's time now for news from the world of sports. Claude Faig is in for Scott Regehr with the Sports Report. Good morning, Claude.
Good morning, Emily. Nothing to complain about here weather-wise if you're at minus 12 right now. So.
Oh, yeah. Don't rub it in now, Claude. Where
not
are
at
you?
All.
Where are you?
We're in Toronto, yeah.
Okay, so the weather is considerably milder, I bet.
A little bit, yeah.
All right, so tough loss for the Jets, but an even bigger loss off the ice. Tell us about that.
No doubt about it, Emily. You know, it was a tough pill to swallow for the Jets last night. They put a lot of pucks on net against the Sharks in San Jose, 37 in all, but could only find the back of the net once in a 2-1 loss to the suddenly relevant Sharks. But equally hard to take was word that Kyle Connor, who injured his knee Sunday against Anaheim, returned to Winnipeg. Now, early estimates have Connor missing 6 to 8 weeks, but he'll be reevaluated by team doctors. Either way, it seems like it will be a lengthy absence. And Brendan Dillon, for one, asked about the loss of their star sniper.
We understand how big of a contributor KC is. He scores a lot of goals for us, but you got to understand that he's not coming back anytime soon. That's the reality of it. We wish him the quickest and best recovery, but overall, you know, there's going to be guys in elevated roles. There's more ice time, more opportunity. Power play was seemed to be clicking pretty good tonight. We just couldn't find a way to get one across the line.
And the Jets will be in tough again tonight. They'll face the Kings in Los Angeles, Emily.
So staying with hockey, Canada's juniors are continuing their camp for the upcoming World Hockey Championships. How's that going?
That's right, Emily. Indeed, some of this country's top junior players are gathered in Oakville, Ontario. That's just west of Toronto for training camp, trying to impress the coaching and management staff. A total of 30 players are in camp, but only 23 will make the trip across the pond for the start of this year's World Junior Hockey Championships that will be played in Sweden. Now, among them is Matthew Wood, a Lethbridge native and first-round draft pick of the Nashville Predators, who's obviously hopeful he'll make the team.
At first, it's kind of try not to think about the whole evaluation and all that. And then once the first couple shifts go by, all the nerves pretty much go away. And, you know, I had a lot of fun out there as well, trying to, you know, make plays and show myself too. So I think everyone had a good time.
Now, he was talking about a scrimmage that Canada's juniors had with a U Sport team yesterday. They won 4-2. Canada's first game, as always, begins on Boxing Day. This year it would be a tough one. They'll face off against Finland. Emily.
Okay. And again, at the international level, Canada's sitting atop the ski cross world thanks to an Ontario Brother and Sister Act.
That's right, Emily. You know, it's been quite a week for a brother-sister duo out of Ottawa. A week ago, neither Hannah nor Jared Smith had captured gold on the Ski Cross World Cup circuit. Last Friday, Jared did break through with a win. And yesterday in Arosa, Switzerland, both landed atop the podium in their races. Now, 29-year-old Hannah used some skill and a bit of luck. The three other competitors that were chasing her all crashed during their runs, allowing Hannah Schmidt a fast track to victory.
I'm finally dialing in my starts and getting them a bit more aggressive, and I'm super happy with today. I would say a little bit of luck was involved, but it feels amazing. I'm super happy and looking forward to more in Italy.
Meanwhile, brother Jarrett, competing on the same course he won at last Friday, beat out teammate and reigning Crystal Globe winner Reese Howden at the finish line in order to take top spot, completing the sibling sweep.
I saw it in the start, so it kind of gave me a little extra energy. Pretty sweet for the Schmidts to go 1-2 here in Arosa. What a night, what a race. It's awesome. It's a dream.
Indeed it was, and the ski cross season, as Hannah mentioned, continues next Thursday with races in Italy. As always, you can watch the races live streaming on cbcsports.ca, the CBC Sports app, and CBC Gem. Emily.
A power family there.
That is awesome. Yeah, that is a great story. Obviously, a little bit more heartwarming during the holidays as well.
Good for them. Thanks so much, Claude.
Thank you, Emily.
That's Claude Faig, who is here with our CBC Sports Report. Well, we're coming up on local news time. Just a couple of words about what's still coming up on this hour of the show. Well, whether it's the river or retention pond in your neighborhood, thin ice can be deceiving and unpredictable. So we'll have more on how you can stay safe around ice surfaces as this inconsistent weather continues. And also, how much do you spend on holiday shopping? We'll chat with a Winnipegger who found a trick to saving money during the holiday season. Her secret is thrifting. The CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's still minus 12 in Winnipeg, but that temperature is about to climb. We're headed to minus 1 under the sun today with a bit of a south breeze. A more than 6-year boil water advisory in Tataskwiak Cree Nation will soon end. The construction of a new $40 million water pipeline is about to begin next spring. The pipeline comes after a national $8 billion drinking water class action settlement affecting First Nations. Tataskwiak's chief, Terralyn Beardy, says she never thought she would see her community get a safe water source.
Very grateful and happy that we're getting this opportunity, after all the impacts of Manitoba Hydro, not to mention all the pollution that comes from down south that's in our water system.
Indigenous Services Minister Patty Haidu tells CBC News a trip to Tataskwiak affected her profoundly as she learned how much people suffered because of contaminated water. One of the private owners of Portage Place Mall says he's happy to see True North Real Estate redevelop what he calls a difficult property. Aftar Baines at Premise Properties is a minority owner of Portage Place and a partner in the mall with Vancouver's Peterson Group. Baines says True North can do what he and his partners couldn't because they're based in Winnipeg and are working with other levels of government.
We're thrilled. We had our eyes open when we bought this asset. We thought downtown Winnipeg was on its way up. Talk about a bad call.
Baines says he and his partners did their best to try to make the mall work as a retail shopping centre, and then when they couldn't, tried to sell it to Toronto Starlight Properties. When that deal fell through, True North entered the picture. Manitoba's housing minister says she feels for the families of 2 people who died this week in a tent in an encampment. Bernadette Smith says no one should lose their life because of cold weather. She wants outreach teams to go to every encampment and bus shelter to get homeless people a place to stay and other supports. Smith is even looking at using hotels.
That's a last resort, but making sure that if we have to put people in hotels, that we have security. We've heard from organizations like an Ante system where they're being taken care of by community.
Smith says shelters are to capacity and she doesn't want to open more because they're just a Band-Aid fix. People struggling with addiction now have a new clinic offering culturally appropriate services in Winnipeg. The new Indigenous-led Rapid Access to Addictions Medicine, or RAM clinic, is inside Aboriginal Health and Wellness Centre on Higgins. Clients can smudge. There are harm reduction kits, including naloxone and counselling. Monica Sear is clinical operations lead at the RAM clinic.
We're looking at probably just over 400 people per a 12-month cycle. And so based on that, we know that the numbers currently are much higher. So does the supply meet the demand? No, it doesn't.
The clinic plans to provide mobile services in the spring. An expert in home care says an increase in Manitobans hiring their own workers is a sign the system's under stress. The vacancy rate for healthcare aides in the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority is 17%. Other regions are also dealing with staffing shortages. Some families are opting for self and family managed care. They get funding from the province to recruit and schedule their own home care. University of Manitoba Associate Professor Christine Kelly says it means more reliability, but it's not for everyone.
It's not that people really want this extra work type of self and family managed care. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility. You have to make a bank account. You have to do all these things. But that they're so unhappy or dissatisfied with the regular home care that it sort of drives them into the self and family managed care.
Kelly says the program has grown from 500 clients in 2015 to 1,500 this year. More Manitobans are chopping down their own Christmas trees legally on Crown lands. The province sells $10 permits allowing people to cut down a tree in certain forests. The number of people using the program has risen tenfold in recent years, from 500 permits in 2010 and 2019 now to 5,000 a year. Andrew Thomason, who visited St. Rita to cut down his tree, says the price tag also helps.
We normally go to a tree farm, but we looked it up this year and it got quite expensive, almost double the amount. So being able to come out here and still cut down your own tree at a reasonable price is definitely sort of the influence.
Across Manitoba, you can find a dozen areas where families can cut down trees. Families are limited, though, to 1 tree each. The Sharks were biting in San Jose last night.
Brendan Dillon rips it through. They score!
Brendan Dillon in the first period on TSN. Winnipeg's only goal of the night as the Jets were edged by the Sharks 2-1. Dillon, once a Shark himself, says he's proud to have played in San Jose.
So bring lots of memories with me. So nice to score in this building. I've had a couple in here, but it was unfortunate not to get the win.
The Jets fall now into third spot in the Central Division behind the Avs and the Stars. Winnipeg ends its road trip tonight in Los Angeles. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks a lot, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Adi Abiemi is our studio technician. Travis Peterson is producer of our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, where you can check us out around the world. And our show director, Pat Kanuga, joins us now with a look at the weather and traffic.
Good morning, everyone. So let's start with traffic, because this is a big deal this morning if you're in the downtown. So northbound Main at Disraeli, there is a working fire. So northbound Main has been closed at Disraeli. So northbound traffic is being diverted westbound onto Rupert or eastbound onto eastbound Disraeli. But if you are able to avoid the area, do so, because there are traffic backups there, and that will be backed up right into downtown northbound Main at Disraeli. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. I'm standing by for your calls if there's anything else happening on the streets of Winnipeg or highways of Manitoba. In the weather, hovering at -12 right now. It's a little bit chilly out there, but we're going to warm up to a -1 today with sunny skies. Not much wind, south 10 in the morning, south 20 this afternoon. Tonight, clear skies. You'll see the stars. Will wake up to a -3. Tomorrow, sunny and mild. This is John Sauter's forecast. He is our meteorologist here at CBC Manitoba. A 3 on the plus side, the daytime high tomorrow. A little bit more wind tomorrow, though, south 25 throughout the day. Friday, a 1 on the plus side. Into your weekend for planning, you might want to get out and do some things. Mix of sun and clouds on Saturday with a -1. Sunday, sunshine and -4. And into next week, we're at -3s for daytime highs for Monday and Tuesday. In Brandon, -15 clear on the way to a high of 0 today. Pretty straightforward day. There's some cloud cover over Brandon right now, though, with the -15 that they're at. I'm looking at satellite and radar images right now. Some cloudy skies in Westman. Winnipeg still looks pretty clear. But tonight for Brandon, down to -10 and, -2, a wind chill of -10. Tomorrow, sunshine and 1. Thompson. Good morning, Thompson. Up Highway 6, cloudy, -16 right now on the way to a high of -6. Wind's going to be gusting to 40 this morning from the south with that -6 daytime afternoon high. Tonight, temperature is going to rise to -2 by morning. And tomorrow, Thompson, mainly sunny and a high of 1. Once again, we're -12 in the city of Winnipeg right now. Hot spot is -8.8, and that was in Sprague. And cold spot in Manitoba is -22.4 in Gillam.
Oh, Gillam, hope you have a nice fire going, or the heat is on full blast in your truck, or wherever you might be.
A little bit of a chilly one in Gillam this morning, yes.
I think I'm going to have a hard time, staying inside and doing all the housework I need to do to get ready for the holidays. With weather like that, I'm going to want to go out on the trails, I think.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to the weekend either way, whatever you're up to. At least it's Wednesday, hump day, right? Well, it's the most wonderful time of the year, but it can also be the most expensive. For many Manitobans, the weeks leading up to Christmas are spent roaming crowded malls, hunting for that perfect gift. But a group of Manitobans are swapping the bustle of the mall for their local thrift store. It's part of a trend called Thristmas. With holiday cheer spread through secondhand and homemade gifts, Winnipegger Angela Taylor is part of that growing group of people heading to the thrift store for this year's presents. Hi, Angela.
Hi.
So why did you want to start thrifting your Christmas gifts?
Well, it started when I was really young because it was a way to, invest back into local economy and save money, which is a reason that a lot of people do Thriftmas. And a way that I can, help my dollars stretch.
And, is there more pressure to stretch your dollars these days?
There is a lot of pressure to stretch our dollar with groceries costing so much more money. Yes.
You have a pretty big family, I think.
I do. There's 4 kids, and lots of long lists of toys and things that people are wanting.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes time to think about gifts for your kids, like what comes to mind and what pushed you towards thrifting for them?
Well, I've always done secondhand gifts wherever I can. It happens all year, not just at Christmas. But this year, lots of requests for dolls and, Hot Wheels and things like that. And it's not always a better deal to buy secondhand, but I'd say probably 70% of the time you can save a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. And I guess there's an environmental factor to that too.
Absolutely. I'd much rather buy something from somebody local than go to like a big box store.
Mm-hmm. And so when you tell people that you're buying them gifts secondhand, how do they react?
Well, it's not for everybody, for sure. But my experience is that, for my nieces and nephews, and they don't really care the difference. So for children, they seem to be more flexible, and for adults, it tends to be something that isn't as welcomed.
Oh, really? Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I think that there's a lot of pressure at Christmas, especially, to have everything be very shiny and new. And it's not everybody's experience to buy things secondhand in general. But I also think that that's changing because of the economy.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess, when you're thrifting, you're not always able to go right up to the aisle and get exactly what you want. What are some of the challenges when you're thrifting for gifts?
I'd say there's a lot more effort that goes into buying something secondhand, because you have something in mind perhaps, and you're kind of watching either Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, and you're having to reach out to people. So in my experience, it's actually more care, more time, more effort. If you have it to share, then sometimes you can find even a better fit.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's something to think about that you actually spent more time finding the right gift for them in a way.
Yeah, and isn't it the thought that counts?
Yes, absolutely. And are there other benefits? Like, how do you feel when you're thrifting instead of going to a big box store?
Well, it's definitely my preference. For me, there's so many benefits. For example, not having as much like cardboard and packaging to take off and then worry about, putting in the right place. That often the items are already put together, so I'm spending less time in trying to make sure that this piece goes into this piece, or is it going to fall apart? It's in good shape because you can physically see it already put together. A lot of benefits, especially when I think about clothes and toys and different things. I tend towards one thing that the kids are wanting, one thing the kids are needing, something to read, something to wear, things like that. And so, you can find really unique things that you can't necessarily find at a box store.
Mm-hmm. And then, what about on a mental health level? Does thrifting affect that during the holidays?
That's a great question. I really enjoy thrifting. I like the finding of the treasure. And so I actually find that it benefits my mental health, in addition to not having the pressures of, not having to spend, quite as much money. So having a budget about half for the same amount of people, I find is really beneficial.
Oh, wow, that could ease a lot of stress right there. So what tips do you have for someone who wants to try thrifting their gifts, but for the first time? Maybe they don't have as much experience as you. What advice would you give them?
Well, my advice to everyone is always to be very compassionate to yourself. So if it's something that feels new, that makes you feel nervous, just understand that that's okay. Learning new skills takes time, and to have fun with it. Just sometimes just to go and browse for a few minutes. I know people are often on their phones anyways, and have something in mind. looking maybe even for something for yourself. I often will buy something for myself for Christmas on behalf of like a mother who, is no longer here. And so having, $5 or a small budget can sometimes let our brain explore what it could be to thrift at Christmas. Start small and see how it feels. Another way is just to go through your house and see different things that you think maybe you don't want anymore, but you can donate to one of the local charities that might have a giveaway day for their community members, their clients. And so you're kind of supporting Thriftmas or thrifting in a way that feels accessible to you.
I like that. Thanks so much, Angela.
Thank you.
And have a happy holidays.
Thank you, you too.
Angela Taylor is a Winnipegger who's opting to buy this year's gifts secondhand. And this is part of a series we're going to have. Tomorrow we'll hear from someone who's been celebrating Thriftmas for decades.
Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But singing along to Yuletide classics and new holiday favorites is what really makes the holly jolly. CBC Music unwraps the gift of holiday playlists to get you into the festive spirit. From pop to jazz, gospel, folk, blues, classical, country, and so many more. Now available on the CBC Listen app.
14 minutes before 8 o'clock, and it's minus 12 at the Forks, going up to a high today of minus 1, mainly sunny and breezy in the afternoon. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. Well, Campbell and Johnston's Black Market Band is currently hard at work on an album they hope to share in the spring. Meanwhile, they do have a holiday song to share with us. Here's It's Christmas Time Again. One. That was Campbell and Johnston's Black Market Band. They're from Halifax, and that was It's Christmas Time Again. Pat Kanuga joins us now in the studio with a traffic call.
Yeah, so this is just an update on that situation on northbound Main. Sean, our friendly neighborhood air compressor guy, gave me a call to update me 3 times as he inched over the Disraeli Bridge southbound. So it looks like things are starting to wrap up. They said there's 1 fire truck, 1 ambulance left, but the lights aren't working at the base of the Disraeli Freeway when you're going into the downtown. You have to either turn right onto Logan or left onto, I believe, that street that is, I'm trying to think of what it is here off the top of my head, but you have to turn, you can't get onto Main basically, but there is a way to get off of the Disraeli on both sides there just before you hit Main. So thank you for the call, Sean. Appreciate it very much. If there's any other updates in traffic this morning, 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line.
That's a tough intersection at the best of times. So good luck to everyone out there. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. And in fact, we put a shout out earlier in the show to let us know where you're listening from. Send us an email at radio893@cbc.ca. We've heard from the Czech Republic, from Brazil, from the United States, like really all over the world. So we'd love to hear from you. You can also throw up a comment on our YouTube page. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Well, it may feel cold this morning, but the milder than normal temperatures this month has left many ice surfaces unpredictable, especially along the riverbanks and retention ponds. Environment Canada is calling for warmer temperatures this week and into the weekend, but as temperatures cool and ice starts to form, the city wants to remind people to be extra careful around all Winnipeg waterways. Justin Kutsak is a public education officer with the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. Good morning, Justin.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. So how dangerous are ice surfaces right now in the city?
Well, right now we've had some really nice weather this fall, and it hasn't given the water time to freeze yet. So this has caused the ice to still be thin and fragile. So, if you happen to fall into the water, you may get swept away under the current, and falling into the ice, cold water can be deadly.
That's really scary. And we always hear about those potential dangers around the river and the ponds, especially early in the winter like now. But what other areas should people be mindful of?
We have to really watch out for all waterways in the city. The city, very important to note, is that the city does not monitor ice conditions on the rivers, waterways, or ponds throughout the winter. So you really have no idea what the conditions could be. There are elements that could be going on under the ice that is causing the water not to freeze, like, there could be current or logs or stones that retain the heat from the sun, and that doesn't cause it to freeze properly. And also in the areas, if there's, water main break where the water is running down the streets, we like to put a lot of salt on our roads to make them not slippery. And this water can run into these ponds, and then it doesn't allow that ice to freeze properly.
And then there's also all the ditches and culverts.
Exactly, yeah. Basically any waterway, like you mentioned, ditches, culverts, ponds, retention ponds, rivers. It's important to really stay off of it because you just don't know how thick or how good that ice is.
And then for people who have kids, what kind of precautions should they take around bodies of water?
Yeah, it's really important for parents and teachers to have those conversations with their kids about the dangers of the waterways and just to stay away from the banks of any waterway. The banks can be slippery and unstable, and they could slip in the water.
And then there's people with pets. You have any advice for them?
Yeah, definitely let's not forget about our pets. Everybody likes to venture out with their animals and let them venture off into the woods. But yeah, we definitely have to watch them as well near the waterways, because we know what it's like when they happen to see wildlife. They could definitely chase them out onto the ice and putting them at risk.
I'm always worried about that when walking a dog. So how many calls does the city get about people falling through the ice?
So the city responds to approximately 150 water and ice safety calls for service. So what people really have to understand too is that when they're out on the ice or near these waterways, they're not just putting their own lives at risk. They're actually putting our responders' lives at risk. As much as we love doing our job, we would rather not be put at risk just because someone's out venturing off for the day and not thinking about the risks.
How dangerous are these calls for first responders?
Well, our responders are highly trained, but, at any moment, something could go wrong. They practice for it. They have technical equipment that they use. But, just like in any situation, there are risks involved that pop up during calls that we may not be aware of. And, like I said, we don't want our responders getting hurt.
So if you see someone falling through a frozen body of water, what should you do?
You definitely want to call 911 immediately. And as hard as it might be, you do not want to go out there and try to rescue them. If it's close enough where you can reach, like a longer stick or a log or something, but you don't know what that ice is doing underneath, and you don't know how thick it is. So you definitely don't want to walk out onto there and try and save them. So what you want to do, like I said, is call 911 and keep track of where they are. If it happens to be, in a river where the part that they're on, it's open water in the middle, and they start going down the river, just keep an eye on them so that when our crews arrive, they have an idea of where they are. And just in case too, if they happen to go down in the river, what could happen too? People can go underneath the water. So at least when crews arrive, they'll get there and the person isn't in the water anymore. They may have got swept underneath. So the more information that we have, the better.
I'm going to be extra careful out there on my walks. Thanks so much, Justin.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
That was Justin Kutzak, a public education officer with the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service. Just a few minutes before 8 o'clock, and Heather Wells joins us now with the news headlines.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba's housing minister says she feels for the families of two people who died this week in a tent in an encampment. Bernadette Smith wants to get outreach teams to go to every encampment and bus shelter to get homeless people a place to stay and other supports. She's even looking at using hotels, something she says would be a last resort. And people struggling with addiction now have a new clinic offering culturally appropriate services in Winnipeg. The new Indigenous-led Rapid Access to Addictions Medicine, or RAM clinic, is inside the Aboriginal Health and Wellness Centre on Higgins. We'll hear more about it in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Quick look at the forecast for today. Mainly sunny, going up to a high of -1, getting breezy in the afternoon. Clear tonight, not as cold as last night was. It's going to go down to a low of -3, and sunny and mild tomorrow with a high of +3 and breezy as well. Well, still coming up, a local school is serving up holiday songs that warm the hearts of their community. CBC's Jim Agapito talks to the teacher who's been planning this event since June and says it's a labor of love. All that is still to come. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1 here in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, and we'll be back after World Report.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Michael Connolly is a huge figure in the world of crime fiction. He'll be here to talk about his new book, how he got his start as a journalist, why he thinks crime fiction is looked down upon, but why it doesn't really bother him.
The pursuit of a hidden truth is a pitch over the plate to anybody.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Before she was Governor General and an award-winning author, Adrienne Clarkson was an acclaimed journalist. She's now been inducted into the CBC News Hall of Fame. Adrienne Clarkson on the greatest stories she's told, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Stephanie Skandaris.
We have come to the conclusion that the course correction that is needed has not been secured.
Anne Rasmussen says the COP28 climate deal isn't enough. She represents an alliance of small island nation states. She says the deal agreed to this morning has promise, but won't limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Despite those concerns, history is being made as the climate summit wraps up. For the first time, delegates agree the era of fossil fuels could be coming to an end. Kyle Bax has more from Dubai.
Hearing no objection, it is so decided.
With the drop of the gavel, 2 weeks of climate talks are over with the New Deal. Countries around the world agreeing on new efforts to tackle climate change.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber.
Together, we have confronted realities and we have set the world in the right direction.
For the first time, a UN climate agreement specifically addresses fossil fuels, saying a transition away is needed to reach net zero by 2050.
I am in awe of the spirit of cooperation that has brought everybody together.
U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry.
To have as strong a document as has been put together, I find, is cause for optimism, cause for gratitude.
Some countries and environmental leaders had wanted more, but it's progress nonetheless, says Catherine Abreu, founder of environmental group Destination Zero.
We have a very clear signal on the end of the fossil fuel era.
The agreement also calls for a tripling of renewable energy and a doubling of energy efficiency around the globe by 2030.
We leave Dubai with our heads held high.
The deal is now done, ending the largest ever global climate summit, but the work on implementing the promises made here is just beginning. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Dubai.
The Israeli army says it has cleared nearly 200 aid trucks to bring supplies into Gaza this morning. It's part of a new process to ease the bottleneck at the Rafah border crossing. But aid groups say the fighting has been too intense in recent days to deliver aid to the places that need it.
Hamas is holding our people hostage in brutal conditions while hiding among and under the people of Gaza. Among and under the people of Gaza. This makes our hostage rescue operation in Gaza complex.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari says the hostage rescue operation will continue for as long as needed. There are unconfirmed reports this morning the IDF is trying to destroy Hamas tunnels by flooding them with seawater. Back home, there is strong reaction to Ottawa's decision to join the international call for a humanitarian ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Canada was one of dozens of countries to vote in favour of a ceasefire at the United Nations General Assembly. That's upsetting many members of Canada's Jewish community. But as Olivia Stefanovich reports, there are others who want the government to go even further. Outside the downtown Ottawa Convention Centre, hosting the Liberal Caucus holiday party, hundreds of upset demonstrators made their stance clear.
We're aware that there was a call for a ceasefire today, but empty words, we're not going to stand for that.
Organizer Hala Alsher says the federal government needs to do more than demand an end to the fighting in the Israel-Hamas war.
This is just the beginning of a very long road to recovery.
Inside the holiday party venue, the Prime Minister didn't mention the word ceasefire.
What's happening in the Middle East is reverberating around the world.
Instead, Justin Trudeau discussed the tensions the conflict is creating within Canada and his own political party.
And we're having hard but necessary conversations together.
Those tensions on full display following Canada's United Nations vote.
153 in favour.
Supporting a call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire.
I hope it won't affect Canada-Israel relations.
Former Liberal Attorney General Irwin Cotler says Canada made the wrong choice.
I was both surprised and disappointed.
At least two Liberal MPs, Anthony Housefather and Marco Mendicino, also voiced their disagreement on social media. Trudeau may hear more about these concerns when he meets with his Liberal caucus later this morning. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa. And U.S. President Joe Biden will meet with families of American hostages held by Hamas. That's expected to happen later today at the White House. The CBC's Richard Madden joins us with more from Washington. So, Richard, what can we expect?
Well, first off, at this point, it's unclear how many of those families will be in attendance, but it is significant as it'll be their first in-person meeting with the president and his top officials to make a personal plea for the administration to be more assertive and creative to free the American hostages. Now, many did speak with Biden virtually over Zoom about a week after the attack, and since then, the White House and Biden's hostage envoy have been in touch. But many families are reportedly expressing frustration, pointing to a separate deal between Russia and Israel that freed several Israeli-Russian hostages and questioning if U.S. negotiators could be more aggressive. Now, President Biden has said repeatedly he won't rest until all American hostages are released. So the first in-person meeting between the families and the president.
Okay, and this meeting coming amid some tension in the U.S.-Israel relationship, right? What's happening there?
Yeah, Israel's military campaign appears to be sparking tensions with the White House, and those divides are spilling into public view. Over the past few days, President Biden has criticized the approach of Israel's hardline government, casting doubts if it wants a two-state solution, and even calling out Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying he needs to change his approach. Take a listen to the president at a recent fundraiser.
But you have to be careful. They have to be careful. The whole world's public opinion can shift overnight. We can't let that happen. We're working relentlessly for the safe return of the hostages. I personally spent...
Yeah, so this rift between the two staunch allies had mostly been contained behind the scenes, but as the civilian death toll rises in Gaza, Biden has become more vocal. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu recently admitted the two disagree on what should happen to Gaza after the war and hopes to reach an agreement on that eventually.
All right, Richard, thanks so much for this.
Thank you.
That's the CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. The family of a murdered Burnaby, BC teen is speaking out after the man accused was found guilty earlier this week. It happened after a dramatic turn in court when the defense lawyer says the father of the victim allegedly brought a gun into the courtroom. The victim and her family's names are protected by a publication ban. Yvette Brand reports.
6 years ago, a 13-year-old girl messaged her big brother in China a few hours before she headed out for a walk in a Burnaby park. She was later found dead there. Prosecutors say she was sexually assaulted and strangled. On Friday, Ibrahim Ali was found guilty of first-degree murder. That same day, Ali's defense lawyer Ben Linsky says the man who police allege brought a weapon into the courtroom was the father of the victim in the case.
Obviously deeply disturbing, and it's chilling, I think, is the word that comes to mind.
Linsky says he had raised security concerns before the incident. He wanted the matter to be handled in a secure courtroom after his office received several threats. Vancouver police said in a statement that a man was arrested after a weapon was allegedly brought into the high-profile murder trial. He's been released pending further investigation. Tuesday night, the victim's brother spoke for the family. He says he will be haunted by his sister's death.
Mere minutes walk away from our home at the time. And this shattered any sense of security that our family had and tore us asunder.
He says his mother...
She lives in a hell of memories with ghosts of my sister at every corner.
Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
Tributes are pouring in for Emmy Award-winning actor Andre Braugher. His publicist confirms he died Monday after a brief illness. Braugher was a Juilliard-trained actor. His big break came in 1989 when he starred in the film Glory, which was up for 5 Oscars. But later in life, he took his sense of gravitas and turned it into comedy, starring as Captain Ray Holt in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
All right, we gotta get there quick.
Maybe we should take the chopper.
Use that chopper.
Deathblade? Sidewinder, it's go time.
Roger that, wet blanket.
No, from now on, call me Velvet Thunder.
One of his co-stars from that show, Terry Crews, called him an irreplaceable talent. Andre Braugher was 61 years old. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. This is CBC News.
If there's an update from that area, please give me an update at our traffic line. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. I would love to get an update on that situation northbound Maine at Disraeli. At 8:12, let's see what's happening in Winnipeg's weather. Here's Abby Adiemi.
Yes, thanks, Pat. Chilly start to Wednesday in Winnipeg. Today's forecast promises a mix of sun and clouds. Currently, we are at a -11 under clear skies, but we're warming up. We'll be headed to a high of -1. This afternoon will be breezy, but mainly sunny. And as tonight rolls in, expect cloudy periods with temperatures dropping to the low of -3. A look ahead of Thursday, we are in for a sunnier day. The skies will persist, and then we'll wake up to a -3 tomorrow. Sunrise this morning will be happening at 8:18, and of course sunsets today will be at 4:27.
13 minutes after 8 o'clock, and it's -11 at the Forks, going up to a high of -1 today. Mainly sunny and breezy in the afternoon. Clear and milder tonight with a low of -3. Tomorrow, sunny and mild with a high of +3, also getting a bit breezy. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. You're listening to Information Radio. Well, it has the potential to be the biggest project to revamp downtown in the past half century. The Southern Chiefs Organization and True North Real Estate Development revealed details yesterday of their new downtown collaboration. SCO will transform the Bay Building into a place for economic and social opportunity where First Nations heritage is celebrated. True North has added to its concept from earlier this year to build housing and a healthcare center at Portage Place. Now it's viewing the project as social redevelopment first and a real estate development second. For reaction to this, Kate Fensky joins us now. She's CEO of the Downtown Winnipeg Biz. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning, Emily.
So you heard the announcement yesterday. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I was there, and it was such, a real meaningful morning, I think, for so many of us. This really is a monumental step forward for both economic and social reconciliation. And the transformation of downtown Winnipeg. And when I think about it, what was so evident yesterday is that we are going to be doing things in a different way. There is a level of collaboration happening in this city that we haven't seen in decades. And what that can do is we can just achieve such greater results. And I think it's so exciting. We've got the right partners in place, the right pieces for these two projects that we weren't sure what the future was going to be.
What do you think's inspiring that spirit of collaboration?
I think we've learned over, especially the last couple of years, that it's really challenging to do things on your own. And, in order to get the right results for community, you need to have so many different voices and partners at the table to make that happen, that we all play a part in the transformation of our downtown. And in order for our downtown to be successful, we all need to figure out, how we can contribute. And I think one of the reasons why it's so important, especially these two projects led by True North and by Southern Chiefs Organization, our downtown has to be successful in order for our city and our province to be successful. And that's what we heard at the announcement yesterday from decision makers, from the Premier to the Mayor to the federal government. We've got all parties on board to make this happen.
And, it's not a power couple we've heard about before, SCO and True North working together. Like, why is it important that those two groups that are pretty different come together?
Yeah, it's really exciting. I think when we first heard about these projects, both of them on their own would be game changers for downtown, but they're across the street from each other. And when we look at the opportunities, both of them are looking at bringing in more housing, which is so critical both for our city but for our downtown. We need more residents living downtown as things have shifted in terms of not as many workers, but also community amenities and supports. And that's really what's critical for our downtown, is that we're creating a neighborhood for the people, the 18,000 people that already live downtown. What are the things that they are going to need? But also as we grow and as we shift and as we change. So when I think about reconciliation and how Winnipeg is really leading in that area in Canada, this is something that we haven't seen before. You know, you have a private company that is locally invested, and you have Southern Chiefs Organization working closely together to find where there's opportunities. So we're talking about training opportunities for Indigenous peoples, education opportunities, housing, and sharing of resources. I think it's just a different way at looking at how we do development, and it's really exciting.
What else stood out to you about this Southern Chiefs and True North announcement?
You know, I think I've been getting some questions from folks just in the last 24 hours, like, do I think this is really going to happen? Do we actually think that these projects that 3 years from now we're going to see them complete? And I do. I'm more optimistic than I've been, since 2019 about the future of our downtown. And when you look at, yes, there's been a 6-month extension on the purchase of Portage Place. That makes sense. Absolutely. They are doing their due diligence. They are consulting with the community. Southern Chiefs Organization, I had a tour of Winnipeg and in there. And they're really doing that project very carefully, making sure that they are archiving historic artifacts, that they are putting more material into recycling than landfill. So both of these leaders in our community are taking their care and caution with these projects to make sure they're done right.
And, as we're reimagining downtown Winnipeg, how much is riding on this? How much pressure is there to get it right as we move towards the 2030s?
I think both of these projects are so important for our downtown. It's almost 2 million square feet. We have a large downtown, though there are other exciting projects happening at the other end of Portage in Maine with the Manitoba Métis Federation and the National Heritage Center there. But there's still gaps. We still have a long way to go. When we look at Portage Avenue, in our zone, we've got a 30% ground floor vacancy. And what's really critical for businesses right now is businesses need people, customers. And so it's also, what does our downtown look like? How are we judged when people come here and visit? So there's some basic infrastructure things along Portage Avenue that really could use some investment. If we've got, Indigenous governments and organizations and private sector investing in our downtown, we need to make sure as well that governments are looking at what role can they play. And we heard that yesterday from the Premier and the Mayor that they want to support these projects, make sure they're successful, but downtown overall as a whole.
Exciting times. Meanwhile, David Thompson was at the announcement as well. He was listening in but didn't speak. He's a partner with True North in the ownership of the Jets, and he has the financial means to help with these projects. What did you take from him being there?
There were so many community business leaders in that room yesterday. It was jam-packed, standing room only. And I think that just shows, the commitment with having, the full team, bringing folks in from outside of Winnipeg for this really important day. I think it just shows a level of commitment that's there, a level of optimism and collective will to make these projects happen.
Thanks so much for talking with us about this morning, Kate.
Thanks, Emily. We're really excited.
I can tell from your reaction. That's great. Kate Fenske is CEO of the Downtown Winnipeg Biz.
It's not just how a story is told. It's about whose story it is to tell. It's not just playing what's new. It's setting the stage for what's next. It's not just about the game. It's bringing your game. It's not just trusted news. It's being where it matters because it matters. It's not how Canadian you are. It's who you are in Canada. It's not just one thing. CBC. It's a Canada thing.
It's 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. At Shaughnessy Park School near Kuwaitan and Selkirk, an annual concert represents more than just Christmas tunes for the community. It offers students from preschool to grade 8 a chance to be exposed to the arts. CBC's Jim Agapito was invited to hear students practice for their upcoming holiday concert called Sneezy the Snowman.
We're gonna build a snowman and have some winter fun. We're gonna find a big hill, and sled right down. We're gonna find a big hill and have some winter
So my name is Madeline Lowe. I am a music and band teacher here at Shaughnessy Park School. I have been here for the better part of the last 5 years, and I teach nursery and kindergarten music all the way to grade 7 and 8 band. So we have a population of about 450 students, and I see about 400 of them every school year. I believe 60 to 80% of our population is Indigenous. We have a huge number of kiddos who are new to Canada. Their families have recently emigrated, or they're kind of first generation Canadians. A large portion of our students live below the poverty line or are involved in financial aid in some sort of way. They don't get to do piano lessons outside of school. They don't get to go to dance class. They don't get to go to drama class. And so this is where it all happens. So right now we're getting ready for our winter concert, and that's all of our students in nursery, kindergarten, grades 1, 2, and 3, 7, 8 band. And then this year we've got performances from our dance team, which is a new program here at Shaughnessy. And we have some digital content that's being provided by our SAD squad, which they're doing a music video for Last Christmas by Wham! That's going to be presented as part of the show.
Why is a winter concert like this so important for this community?
A lot of the times the only arts education that they're getting is what happens in our building. So the only time they're getting music education is what they get from me. This performance, this is the big hurrah at this point in the year. This is the big opportunity for those students to get to perform and go through the process of putting on a production and learning music and learning repertoire. I really want to give them such a positive experience, so we really go all out. Like, we have our stage being built, we've got props, we've got costumes, I'm renting lights for us to have like that really big on-stage performance. So going through that process is a learning opportunity for them. It's really important for me to make it as authentic as possible. Like, this is something that I start planning for in June. Even coming back in September, we were already starting to plan for this.
So you've been doing this, I imagine, for a couple of years, correct?
This is my kind of 5th year here at Shaughnessy, and I was doing the math in the car this morning. This is my 7th production that I've done. This is my 3rd at this school.
What does it do for some of the kids?
For the kids, they love performing, but it's also the community piece. This is like a tradition in our community. This is something kids look forward to. This is something that grandparents come into town for. This is something that aunts and uncles come in for, and it's now become part of family traditions, is coming to the winter concert. And for me too, even personally, it's part of my holiday tradition. Like, my own parents come and watch my performances. I try to choose songs that are going to be accessible for every kid, but I also try to create opportunities for solos, opportunities for students to be featured on their own. And so it's an opportunity for kiddos to perform where they normally wouldn't, and like to kind of shine a little bit too.
What's it like working with every different group of students?
It's wild, but it is such a huge privilege. I get to work with every kid in the building. They have a consistent person through all their years at their school. I think, like, when a kid goes into a new classroom, they build that relationship with the classroom teacher. But it's also exhausting, but in the best sort of way. Like, for my timetable, I sometimes have days where I teach 7-8 band, then I teach kindergarten, then I teach 3, and then I teach band again, all in the same morning. So you get a little bit of like a whiplash, but it really keeps it interesting and it really keeps it energizing. Like, I look forward to coming to work every day, and I look forward to getting to see the students, and I look forward to getting to do all sorts of things. Recently, we took some of our band kids to see the Royal Canadian Air Force concert at the Burton Cummings, and just doing a quick poll of those 37 kids that we brought, 25 of them had never been to a live music performance before. So them participating in this, for many of them who didn't get to do this earlier in the pandemic, or just joining band, or were in schools where they didn't have this program, this is the first time they've ever been on stage. This is the first time they've ever done any sort of live performance. There's a place for every kid in music, and it's not always band, it's not always singing, it's not always what we do here in the classroom, but by exposing to that and letting them have those experiences, there's ways for them to find those places for themselves.
The group that we're going to see today, who is that group going to be?
First thing today, you're going to be seeing our grade 3s.
Okay.
So we're at a point now where we're combining groups just to get them used to performing in a larger group. So they are working on kind of the feature part of our show, which is our adaptation of Sneezy the Snowman. So this is what I was working on back in June. So the picture book is Sneezy the Snowman by Maureen Wright. And so I've taken that storybook and I've curated songs that fit the themes of that book.
Snowman, snowman, where'd you go? You were just here in the snow. I looked high, I looked low.
Isabel Reno Giron.
Tell me a little bit about the winter concert.
Excited because it's like makes me feel happy to like perform, because I like talking and singing and like having lines and stuff.
What's your favorite part to perform so far?
My favorite part is when it's Better Bundle Up, the song, because the actions are fun.
What is music and your teacher here mean to you?
I don't really know how to explain, but all I know is that I like doing it.
Why should people come to this concert?
Because it's fun to watch, and everyone here is like happy performing.
Snowman, where could you be? Sounds like a great mystery. That was CBC's Jim Agapito visiting Shaughnessy Park School. The Sneezy the Snowman concert happens next Wednesday, December 20th.
This is your heart. This is your heart after discovering a new CBC podcast. These are your feet. These are your feet after finding a CBC music playlist. This is your brain. This is your brain after hearing your favorite CBC radio show. Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Stream CBC audio anytime, anywhere, all for free. Download CBC Listen today.
Oh, holy night, the star is brightly shining. That's all.
That's all you got, Mom?
Yeah.
Hi, it's me, Jim Agapito. And that, of course, is my Yuletide-loving mom, Yolanda. She was my unofficial guide, and heck, the star of my CBC podcast, Recovering Filipino. She taught me all sorts of things about being Filipino, but we never got to tackle one of the biggies, Christmas. Join me for a special Recovering Filipino, the longest Christmas season in the world. You can hear it here on CBC Radio 1 at noon on Boxing Day, or you can find it on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's 8:28 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, and we're joined now by our producer, Pat Kanuga.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Just a quick update on that traffic situation. Still slow going northbound northbound Main at Disraeli. There was an emergency incident there that was really tying things up for a couple of hours. It's still slow going, but apparently it's starting to ease up as far as the amount of emergency vehicles there. 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. If there's anything else you want to tell us before we're off the air at 8:37. Emily, you've been mentioning, and we've been mentioning today, we've been asking people, where are you listening from? Which we do every once in a blue moon here on Information Radio. We heard from Florida, Nicaragua, Scotland, Brazil. Unbelievable people listening to us on the World Wide Web and now able to watch us on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. One more, Lloyd Romaniuk, or Romaniuk, depending on how you pronounce it, is out plowing his driveway this morning in Ear Falls, Ontario, listening to the radio show. So good morning, Lloyd, and thanks for tuning us in. We appreciate that
Yeah,
very,
I wonder
very
where
much.
Ear Falls is. You'll have to send us a follow-up there, Lloyd.
Just past the White Shell, if I'm not mistaken, or around
perfect.
there.
Okay.
And just before news at the bottom of the clock here, we should give a special hello and goodbye to Margot Watt. It's her last day at CBC Manitoba after 23 years, former host of Up to Speed. She's been producing our Radio Noon show for years now, and she will be missed. So there'll be more of a goodbye to her today on Radio Noon with Marjorie Dowhouse. But thank you, Margot, for all your work here over 23 years.
Yes, excellent work and excellent support. Just a great spirit of mentoring towards new journalists and people who are new to hosting, including me. So many thanks to Margot Watt. The CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is -11. We are about to warm up. It's going to be sunny, a high today of -1. Later today, the Manitoba government is expected to chart a course towards digging out of a massive financial shortfall. A news conference has been scheduled for 12:45 this afternoon. Details now from CBC reporter Ian Fraze.
The province needs to tackle a projected deficit this fiscal year of $1.6 billion. Today, the NDP government is expected to give details as to how. Last week, Premier Wabkanu hinted at potential measures. He said the province would pull back on some former PC government commitments that never got off the ground. Kanu says Manitoba must tighten its belt. The estimated deficit is quadruple what the province forecasted in the spring. The NDP has accused the PCs of making expensive promises in their last months in office without setting aside the money. But the Tories have shot back, claiming the NDP is just inflating the deficit number to make the PCs look bad. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Tara Lee Beardy never thought she would see her community get a safe source of water. But a national $8 billion drinking water class action settlement affecting First Nations is about to change that. The chief of Tatasprat Cree Nation tells CBC News the construction of a water pipeline will begin next spring. Beardy says the community's water has been making people sick for years.
Very happy, very pleased, because hopefully now, our health of our people will improve, because we have a lot of people with chronic illness. And hopefully, that clean drinking water will make a big difference in the health and wellness of all our people.
Tatasqueyak has been under a boil water advisory since 2017. Manitoba's housing minister says she feels for the families of two people who died this week in a tent in an encampment. Bernadette Smith says no one should lose their life because of cold weather. She wants outreach teams going to every encampment and bus shelter to get homeless people a place to stay and to get them other supports as well. Smith is even looking at using hotels.
That's a last resort, but making sure that if we have to put people in hotels, that we have security. We've heard from organizations like an anti-system where they're being taken care of by community.
Smith says shelters are at capacity and she doesn't want to open more because they're just a Band-Aid fix. People struggling with addiction now have a new clinic offering culturally appropriate services in Winnipeg. The new Indigenous-led Rapid Access to Addictions Medicine, or RAM clinic, is inside Aboriginal Health and Wellness Centre on Higgins. Clients can smudge, there are harm reduction kits including naloxone, and there's counselling. Monica Sear is the clinical operations lead with RAM Clinic.
We're looking at probably just over 400 people per a 12-month cycle. And so based on that, we know that the numbers currently are much higher. So does the supply meet the demand? No, it doesn't.
The clinic plans to provide mobile services in the spring. The province's home care system may be able to learn from a program that allows clients and their families to hire their own workers. University of Manitoba Associate Professor Christine Kelly says self- and family-managed care is increasing in popularity. It's grown from 500 clients in 2015 to 1,500 this year.
They can kind of do a more flexible array of tasks that really serve the client in a very family-centered, person-centered way, helping with what needs to be done rather than 20 minutes for a bath and 15 minutes for this. And so there is a lesson there that we can learn without turning the whole system into a market-based home care.
Kelly says it is more work, but some families find it offers more flexibility amid staffing challenges in the public system. If you don't have your Christmas tree yet, you can always go chop one down yourself. CBC reporter Bryce Hoy spoke with people doing just that legally on a plot of Crown land east of Winnipeg.
Actually got lost in the bush for like 2 or 3 hours, except I found the tree.
Dave Reed drags a balsam fir out of a snow-encrusted forest east of Winnipeg and heaves it onto the back of his pickup truck.
Okay, that's it.
Reed and his wife Yvette Brolt have been cutting down their own Christmas tree for 35 years. Like them, more Manitobans are buying permits to legally harvest on designated patches of Crown land. Between 2010 and 2019, the province sold about 500 permits per year. That average jumped tenfold to 5,000 per year since 2020 when e-licensing was introduced. Some do it to save some cash around the holidays. Permits run for about $10. But Dave and his wife Yvette do it because it's tradition.
He loves going in the bush. You're picking your own tree, and it's just the feeling of being out in the bush on your own.
Manitobans can buy permits online until Christmas Day.
Merry Christmas.
Bryce Hoy, CBC News, St. Rita, Manitoba.
Time to channel your inner Paul Bunyan. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That was Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And Pat Kanuga is joining us for one last look at the weather.
I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. Isn't that how it goes?
Kind of.
A last look here. Minus 11 in the downtown. Cloudy, but we expect to be more sunny than cloudy. A -1 for a daytime high today. -3 tonight. Tomorrow a +3. +1 on Friday. That's what Winnipeg's looking like the next few days. It's -14 in Brandon right now. Mostly cloudy on the way to a high of 0. And Thompson, you're -15. Mostly cloudy. You'll see a high of -6 today. Warmer tomorrow with a +1, Thompson. That is it for our Wednesday. Have a great day, listeners, and you as well, Emily. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Pat. Hope you have a great day, too. Also in studio with us is Adi Abiemi, our studio technician, and Travis Peterson, producer of our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Markusa. Coming up on The Current, former Governor General Adrienne Clarkson was recently inducted into the CBC News Hall of Fame. This morning she joins Matt Galloway for a conversation about her storied journalism career and reflects on the future of journalism. And that's on The Current coming up next. Hope you have a fantastic day out there.